And
Yeah.
Pilot's my favorite character.
Nick, welcome. So
Hi.
what is your opinion on the musical Jesus Christ Superstar? And what's your
I
favorite
actually
number?
never saw it.
Oh, okay. Well, you lived it, I guess.
Yeah.
You don't need to see
I
it.
guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. You're looking
Hi.
good. Yeah, I like
Thanks.
the
Yeah,
stash.
you're looking good too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm really glad you're here, and I don't think we've really spoken for a number of years, tons of acrimony, and it's always good to just wipe the slate clean. Tomorrow is another day, and we can all move forward. And I wanted to talk a lot about like your life and things like that. But before that, I'll pay you a compliment. And this is something that we've been talking about a lot on this on this members only call, which is that I'm twice your age or something like that. And so I can remember the days of conservatism in the early 2000s Bush era. If you had any unkind word, if they even thought that you might think something negative of Israel, they would just they might just crucify you. I mean, symbolically. I mean, it was. I can't overestimate the degree to which the conservative movement was stifling at that point. And you could actually have different opinions on some other things. You could talk about immigration. You could talk about tax policy or whatever. And they would kind of tolerate, differing views. But the Israel thing was there. Now, when I go on Twitter, yeah, I see a lot of the old Zionist stuff and, our greatest ally, the aircraft carrier in the Middle East, the Jews are the chosen people, it's David's kingdom, blah, 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 blah. But I've noticed that it's maybe 50-50 if you're a conservative under 30. I mean, that's fair in the sense of you're very critical of Zionism. And I just want to say this, and I'm not I'm not trying to butter you up or anything. I think this is just simply true, that you have had an effect on that they are following you. And even if the fact is, maybe it's small, maybe it's large, it's a real effect. And I don't think that we would be seeing this without the growth of your movement and so on. It's because you kind of put your toe into the pool and you're like, well, actually you can jump into this thing. It's not lava. It's the water's fine. And
Here.
I don't know. You can just talk a little bit about that, but also just what your feeling is in terms of the vibe of young conservatisms with regard to the Israel issue.
Well, thanks a lot. I really, that's a great compliment. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it is pretty remarkable. And I talked about this on a Twitter space, I want to say last week. And Jonathan Greenblatt said it a couple of weeks ago. He said, it's not an ideological divide, it's a generational divide on the Israel issue that,
friend of the show, Jonathan Greenblatt, dear friend of ours. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And supporter. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a big fan of yours. Yeah, I think so. But yeah, so he said that
I think the word was
crowd.
sludge. He referred to you as sludge.
Yeah, he called me sludge, actually. He said he's sludge. Yeah.
Not too bad.
It's a very hateful, that's kind of a hateful remark. I don't know. But yeah, so it is really a generational thing. And on the left, of course, it's very different. They don't like Israel for their reasons. They're anti-colonial or whatever. It's non-white. But you're right. On the right wing, they're either going to the Turning Point meetings and they take the birthright trip and all that, or they're Groyper or Groyper adjacent or something like that. And you're right. I mean, it's something that I can't really take all the credit because I feel like I was just a person that sort of took Trumpism to its logical conclusion. I kind of took America first, which is something that Trump really broke that barrier with nationalism and spoke that into existence. And I identified very early on, and it was calculated on my part when I was in college, that America first contradicts the current situation because it's obviously not America first. And whenever there's discussion about globalism or special interest or, foreign influence in the country, again, there's this blatant Israeli element to that as well. And so I sort of, because I got red pilled, I want to say my freshman year of college, shortly before Trump won the election. And when I started my show, I said, let's exploit and force this contradiction on America First, on calling out the special interest. And so I feel like Trump kind of primed everybody, and maybe I was the guy that had to go in and kind of bring it all the way there. And I think that more so than, because I don't know that I ever had a mass, nor do I now, had a mass audience in the way that Charlie Kirk does, or a Benny Johnson or a Tucker. But I think I'm disproportionately known in the industry. I mean, I don't like to call it that, but you understand, like, I feel like influencers know me. People that are in politics know me. And I think maybe more than I influenced a great big audience, I influenced a small cult following, which then eventually influenced a lot of people in the political industry. And so you get these guys who were maybe never examined the issue too closely, and they're zealots, there's true believers. And I think it made a lot of them uncomfortable. I think maybe the biggest effect is after the Groyper War, it made guys like Charlie Kirk self-conscious about being so supportive of Israel, or maybe not Charlie Kirk, but people in that conversation. It made them aware, and it either there was sort of an internal protest or an external protest of that. Either way, they were self-conscious of, if I say this, everyone will call me an Israel shill. Like Charlie Kirk got called an anti-Semite a couple weeks ago, and he said, but people call me an Israel shill. And it's like, that's something that I don't know if that was even in the lexicon 7 years ago. So
I don't think they were even conscious of it. Yeah, I don't think they were even conscious of it, because there was no other way to think. It was like option A or option A, and right. and then I think with like the alt-right, some other people, and also just the kind of widening of discourse with social media, et cetera, you started to have to be self-conscious of it. You had to actually justify what you're doing, and then also ask, like, how does this configure with all of these claims of America first? And it doesn't. I mean, Joe Biden, I've seen these images of him from the 90s where he's like, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent it. It is our aircraft carrier, just the iron fist of the American empire, whatever he's saying. But that's one way of viewing it. But I think you have to become conscious of it, and then you start to ask some deeper questions, like, there's notion of the chosen people and Holy Land, et cetera, given to Moses and Joshua, et cetera, in the Bible. But also, what does that mean as a Christian? What does that mean for my own identity as a Christian? And that raises some complicated questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I can't take all the credit. I just feel like I was a very belligerent and confrontational and loud person, which a lot of people are critical of me for those things. And I'll admit, like, I think getting attention is a strong suit, and I am confrontational. I am belligerent. But as a consequence, I feel like I forced that issue. I would show up to CPAC like you did, and I called them out on the carpet like Will Chamberlain in 2017 or 2018, and said, hey, like, let's have the Israel foreign aid debate on the floor of the CPAC convention. And as a consequence, over 5 years of persistence and just kind of throwing myself at them at a great personal cost, it hasn't been easy, but I think that the issue has been forced. So so it's a pretty remarkable thing. But like I said, I think that the door was sort of opened wide by I can't, like I said, I hate that expression, but standing on the shoulders of giants. It's true. Guys like Trump, guys like Ron Unz, guys like even the Israel lobby, Mearsheimer and Walt. I mean, there was so much. I feel like this issue is kind of waiting to burst with Trump.
Well, it's definitely waiting to burst. And one thing that I've noticed is that maybe more than any other issue, I mean, you could kind of see this with like Medicare for all, where basically kind of everyone supports that, but the insurance companies are like, no, never, that would be horrible, but this just shows like real strong divisions. Like you have all of these left, like John Fetterman, who's the other like minivan mom, I can't remember her name, in Congress, and some of these other people who kind of present themselves as like socialist or whatever. They're waving the Israel flag, and there's like there's a real division, I think, between a changing population, and some of that has to do with demographics also, to be frank. It's a unintended consequence of demographic change, is that people aren't going to be, hyper Zionist, Christian Zionists. But then also there's a split within the left that's very strong. I mean, there's a split within the right. The split within the left is much stronger. And I think there might even, you could say, be a split within the establishment on this, in the sense that, I mean, if you're an academic and if you're a tenured professor at Princeton, you're part of the establishment. I mean, there's no other way to describe you. And if those types of people who have a lot of authority, deserved or not, if those type of people are breaking away, I think Israel is like on thin ice. And I think in a weird, I think there was a lot of like pressure for Bibi Netanyahu to act this brutally and violently in Gaza. But I think some of that had to do with the fact that this isn't like 1998 anymore, and it's not 2005 anymore. And you're not going to be able to get away with this in 10 years. And he's indicted himself. There's that like inherent pressure. And so I almost see a kind of now or never, like, let's go for it. Let's bomb the hell out of these people. Let's push them out. Let's annex Gaza, which I think is what will be the outcome of this. But yeah, I mean, I think this is like where we see it as oppressive, and in the sense that people get fired for being critical of Israel. Everyone's called an anti-Semite, but I think that's almost like the waning days of this. That's what I think, because in 2004 you didn't need to like police anyone. You didn't need to. Everyone was, it was just, if you were anti-Israel, you're some weirdo, or something, or some, dubious Muslim of some kind, At this point, if you're anti-Israel, it just means you're like educated.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's why it's sort of suspicious. I've been thinking about it lately. I almost think that's why Turning Point and PragerU exist, is specifically because when I read Costin Alamaryu's paper on Columbia Unbecoming from 20 years ago, he was writing about how the Middle East studies departments were being taken over by progressive leftists that support Palestine. And there is a real panic because the university is the epicenter of where this sort of split in the left is occurring, where all these progressive leftists, I mean, there's guys like Joe Biden, who, like you say, 40 years ago, they said that Israel's the aircraft carrier, but there's 500 people in his administration who are opposing the policy now. And there's people in Congress and on the universities, which is why now they're pulling the donations from Harvard and from Columbia and from, I forget the other ones, UPenn, I guess. But this has been the battle going on the campus for 20 or 30 years. And now we're seeing the people that were graduating back then. I mean, they are now the Democrat elites. They're now in the establishment. They're now in these places. And they're calling for Israel to be restrained on sort of an ideological basis. And I was thinking about it the other day. It's like, clearly groups like Turning Point and PragerU, the so-called campus groups, it's meant to sort of arrest this trend and to get Israel back in the good graces on the campus with the next generation, specifically in the elite conversation. I think they don't really care maybe what the masses think, who are not informed or don't care, I mean, because these are people with low agency on either side, whether they're Republicans or they're, the underclass on the left. I mean, these are people that are told what to think by TV, but it's the people in the universities that are on the right or on the left. They're looking for where's going to be their constituency in 15 or 20 years, because if the right is going to be Buchananite, Groyper, or America Firsters, and the left are following Ilhan Omar, and like you said, the thing is that Israel has no security without the United States. If there's an erosion of support for Israel in the United States, they're done. And you're exactly right. And what you're saying is it's desperation, that what Netanyahu is doing is desperation. The cancellations are desperation. And it's true. On the contrary, people think that's an expression of strength. I think it's an expression of the current state of affairs, the kind of influence they wield, but it's also an expression of a panic, that they realize that the situation is tenuous and it won't last forever. And maybe it's sort of rapidly changing. which is why it's so dramatic and why it's so blatant. Normally, or maybe like you say, it wasn't even necessary, but maybe normally it would have been more subtle. Now there's no subtlety, not over there, not over here. And that's because they recognize time's up, and pretty soon it's going to be a different reality for that country. They can't count on the same kind of support domestically, and then that translates to the military support over there, which is, that's going to be a big problem for them.
Yeah. And, I think there's also something that, you and I can consider. You're more of a populist, but, we have more, we have similar viewpoints. And I remember a number of years ago, Scott McConnell, he was my former boss, and he hated me. He fired me, actually. But anyway, he's still around. You can find him on Twitter. But he wrote this article that I remember criticizing, and then 15 years later, I'm kind of like, he was right. So he wrote this article about the ironies of paleoconservatism, and what he was saying is that you have these paleos that are white, Christian, older, trad, generally Southerner, Midwesterner, etc. And they want an American first foreign policy. They don't want the Iraq War. They opposed it. They got burned for opposing it, etc. But they also don't want immigration. They want to keep it kind of smaller America. But the irony of immigration is that at some point, that demographic change will have an effect on elite opinion. Now, elite opinion is probably like, it's distanced from the populace, and maybe it's kind of behind on some ways. Like they'll do gay marriage kind of late, and they'll be like, "Oh, look, we're so innovative," and the culture had already changed, like 20 years beforehand, before gay marriage. Barack Obama did gay marriage in his second term, as an example. But at some point, there's going to be a radiation of the demographic reality. And I think what Scott McConnell was saying, correctly, is that these paleos hate the immigrants, but they like the immigrants' foreign policy. And there are going to be changes, like all this wokeism. When Ben Shapiro talks about wokeism in the colleges, and that's why they don't support Israel, like on some level that's stupid, but on some level that's actually correct, And it's like, yeah, they are awake now to an occupation of a brown population by a Jewish, like they have awoken to this, the correct, Ben. And then also just a different population. They're not going to be the Bible thumping, God's chosen people, Hagee style nonsense. And so I think there is something at least to consider there. There's a kind of irony. Like, I don't know what America is going to look like as it becomes increasingly non-white. And I think the elite will, in a way, have to respond to that, because they need to have some sort of legitimacy when they engage in foreign policy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I said that the other day, or I should say someone else said that the other day on Twitter, that one of the actually good byproducts, and it's an unintentional byproduct of the mass immigration, is that they all hate Israel, or a lot of them hate Israel. And that doesn't make me in favor of what's going on. Obviously, I think we both wish it wasn't happening. And yet, there is an opportunity there. There is an opportunity to take advantage of that. And I don't think, politics is about exploiting contradictions. It's the art of the possible. It's taking what there is and using it. And and the thing is, it was sort of funny. I had a moment where I was, I live in Chicago, and I was driving the other day, and I saw a couple of Muslim kids on their way to the protest. They had their Palestinian flags and their signs. Mm-hmm. And I thought for a moment, my first reaction is, I'm going to give them a thumbs up, I'll honk, whatever. But then I thought, you know what? But these people, like, they hate me. If they knew who I was and my views and everything, I'm sure they wouldn't really like me. And I also thought that if I went downtown and I attend the protest, my reasons for supporting this are very different from their reasons. And I don't even know that they'd necessarily agree. If I go up there and say, hey, this isn't putting America first, and they're down there because they're Muslim, or they're out there because it's a colonial, there's some truth in that. And so that's the thing. I'm not going to honk, and I'm not going to go attend their protest, but I'm also not going to get in the way of it. Why would I get it? And I saw something on Twitter as well where somebody said, and I think a lot of whites are coming to this conclusion, when the non-white people that have been pouring in were taking down our monuments and attacking our country, the Jews were silent. The elites were silent. We just had to sort of deal with that. Now that they want to burn down Israel, well, we're expected now to become white nationalists. Now we can be white nationals. Now we're going to kick them all out. Tommy Robinson's going to go confront them in the streets, you know, and we're going to be sicked on them. And I'm like, you know, no, I
Douglas
don't really
Murray
so.
is calling for blood. You know, I mean, it's like the one moment he turns into a Nazi, like on behalf of the Jews. So it's like the one moment Israel is being protested, like legally above board protest, he's like, they all must die. He goes like full like Darth Vader mode. And it is remarkable. But I mean, maybe this also gets to that issue of the Jewish experience, because, you know, there's a white nationalist meme of, what is it, 109 countries, and let's make it 110 or what, and it's one of these kind of, you know, somewhat thoughtless memes, to be honest. But there's truth to that. Like, they have, particularly in Europe, less so in the Middle East, remarkably, particularly in Europe, they've suffered wave after wave of expulsions and returns and revivals of anti-Semitism. They've suffered from Catholic anti-Semitism, Protestant anti-Semitism, secular anti-Semitism of the Enlightenment. I mean, Voltaire got in on the act too. I mean, it is a recurring cycle. And so you kind of have to look at that, like, sociologically at some point. Like, is there a cycle to it? Like, is it actually ironic that they are not going to stand up for the people who actually support them? Like, there were a lot of, you know, there was me and whatever. I'm kind of unique, but like, there were a lot of just down home guys who were probably Christian Zionists, to be honest, who don't want their monuments to Robert E. Lee taken down. And the Jews, it's, you know, you could argue that, like, they didn't see that, and they didn't see how it would be better for them to kind of keep that Southern nationalism going. But maybe that's endemic to them. And I'm not associating them with this fable, that the famous, like, frog taking the scorpion across the river and it stings him. Why did you do that? Well, you knew who I was before I hopped on your back. I'm not equating Jews with insects or anything like that. But what I am saying is that maybe there's a kind of there's an inner dynamic to their way of thinking, that they put themselves in this position. As you said, they're now getting, there's a kind of pincer move. The right is probably less impactful, but it is turning on Israel. And the alt-right, your Groyper movement, MAGA, whatever, there's growing kind of criticism under boiling anti-Semitism and so on. The left, that they have in a way created. I mean, it didn't need to exist. There's been a clear Jewish involvement in the ideological formation of the left, of the immigration, just the actual people coming in, that they've empowered the people who are going to persecute them. I mean, isn't that kind of wild? But maybe it's like endemic to a Jewish mentality, because it's happened over and over again. It's not like we're going after the Italians, or, you know, or the Irish, or, you know, where it's kind of like, well, that's a bit of a unique situation. This is something that does repeat, and maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's an inner engine or an inner logic to it, where they will empower their own persecutors, and they'll shit on their own defenders in this just really weird way. But it just seems to be uniquely Jewish and predictable and repetitive.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's almost just like bad karma, you know, because I think about somebody like Sheldon Adelson, who, I mean, he poured in all this money to sort of remake the Republican Party into the Zionist Party over the last 13 years. And yet it's almost like they didn't protect that investment by making sure that the GOP or the GOP's base would be okay. And maybe the best example of that was with Trump. Trump was no better friend to Israel than any other president, and so on and so forth. And he did all these things. And then when Trump had this contested election, Netanyahu threw him right under the bus and threw his support behind Joe Biden before the election had even been resolved or certified or whatever. And that is sort of like an unexplainable blunder, because Netanyahu really lost. I mean, the things we know about Trump is that he's a pure egotist and competitive, and loyalty is very important to him. Although, you know, you and I both know about the administration. That's sort of a difficult subject. But I mean, superficially, he says he's all about loyalty. And here was an opportunity for Netanyahu to sort of pay it forward and to take care of their guy or whatever. But it's almost like they saw that in that moment, he wasn't useful for them. And they said, well, the next guy is going to be Biden, so let's throw in with him. And now we see that Trump will be the nominee. He'll be the president. And in the moment of peril for Netanyahu, Trump throws him under the bus and says, well, it was his mistake, and Hezbollah is really smart, and they're doing it. And the Jews hate the Palestinians just as much as the Palestinians hate the Jews. And it's like, you know, that was a moment where just a little bit of beneficence or magnanimity for an ally, for a goyish ally, it would have paid dividends, and they couldn't do it. And, you know, you sort of have to examine the psychology there. But I agree. I mean, I think that that's why it is repeated throughout history. There's something is inherent there in that group, that they keep sort of making the same mistake.
If I may add, I think that Musk has played a huge role in the present dynamic. I know that Nick is still banned from Twitter, which is unfortunate. Hopefully you get your account back. And I know that Richard has criticisms of Musk, but I think that he has totally changed the climate in a kind of single-handed way. And he has created more free speech, imperfectly, of course. I mean, Nick should be back on NGP. Other Kevin McDonald and Jared Taylor, of course, should be back on the platform. So, but nevertheless, I think that there has been an increase in free speech on this critical platform of Twitter, and I think it's been kind of decisive. I mean, people are online complaining that Musk went to Israel and is kissing the ass of Netanyahu, but I see it kind of the opposite. I think that Netanyahu is basically kowtowing to Musk and has to kowtow to Musk. I mean, I think that there's a lot of give and take with that relationship. Now, who knows where that will end or where the chips will land and so forth. But Netanyahu sees Musk as he controls a key organ of media around the world, which is Twitter, of course, right? And it's social media, so it's it's this new democratized form of media. But I think Musk has been basically a game changer. Now, we can have our criticisms of Musk, definitely imperfect or whatever the case may be, but I think he's created a climate that's made that has really put Jews in the Israel lobby in a kind of precarious position, essentially. Anyway, so that was my only remark, and because I think that he has to kind of some mention of Musk has to go into this discussion.
I do think you're right about that. Nick might have a little more resentment towards Musk but yeah. I totally agree, and I think that give and take is exactly the right expression, because, you know, and it's difficult sort of to parse, because we see elites go and pay fealty to the Jewish establishment in various forms. And, you know, and that's always the question is the tail wagging the dog, or, you know, what exactly is the order of operations there? And I think it's pretty clear, like you said, with Musk, almost immediately, because it's only been a year since Musk acquired Twitter, which is not really a long time. And the changes didn't even begin to roll out until less than a year ago. And yet, the change has been dramatic. How much the window has shifted noticeably on issues like white identity, which apparently is suddenly mainstream. It wasn't for a long time. It seemed like Charlie Kirk said one or two things about it last year. And then this year, now everyone's a white nationalist. Now everyone's a white identitarian. Maybe not fully, but I mean, certainly it's far more acceptable in the conversation, even the word white, than it was years ago. And I never thought it would be the case, but the same thing is true with critique of Jewish power. Things like ban the ADL and talking about the genocide in Gaza, or any other number of things. And it's amazing that just acquiring one of the major social platforms, you see why they had to shut down the technology basically in its infancy, because really you didn't get adoption
widespread adoption until 2013, 2014. It was shut down by 2017. And there was all this meme about the rabbit hole, the YouTube recommended that is radicalizing people, these pieces in New York Times. And so they had to do the algorithmic curation and the censorship and the shadow banning. You open up one of the social platforms, it's so hot, it's so fast, it changes public opinion virtually overnight and really in our favor. But like you say, that came with, I think, this sort of negotiation with Netanyahu, where there has been the advertiser boycott, which has been ongoing for a year, and there are, I'm sure, other efforts underway to undermine Musk. And Musk, it seems, is sort of playing a very tactful game where there, like you say, there seems to be a trade, like where he was called out on the carpet for this anti-Semitic remark last week. Then he goes to Israel. He says, we're going to ban River to the Sea on Twitter, and Jonathan Greenblatt thanks him for it. So there clearly is a negotiation happening. But I agree. I think Musk is a very deft and strategic player with this. And I think it's ultimately for our benefit, as evidenced by recent events.
Yeah, look, he said absolutely correct to a somewhat random right-wing Twitter user who basically gave a Kevin McDonald argument,
Yeah.
And he just said, absolutely, this is absolutely correct. I mean, that is, I have to say that's remarkable. I just have this contrarian tendency where I like to just kind of hate on Musk.
No.
Yeah. Well, someone's got to do it.
Well, today he said a very remarkable thing. I think it was it was maybe today, maybe it was yesterday, but it was an interview, I believe, with the New York Times, and in the clip that people are sharing is that the interviewer was asking him about, well, isn't he concerned about the advertisers leaving his platform and so forth? And he was just like, fuck the advertisers, fuck the advertisers. I mean, it was a very in that, it's just like this kind of revolutionary energy, essentially. I mean, who has said something similar to that? And it's a kind of anti-capitalistic, like, fuck you. You can't control my speech through your money. You're bribing it. It was very. I have to say that I admired it.
It's hard not to. He called out Bob Iger. He was like, Bob, I know you're in the audience. Go fuck yourself. I mean,
and then he said,
I don't know about this, guys. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is Charles Johnson here, and you have to understand there's always
Charles
been a
Johnson.
relationship.
Oh, okay.
There's always been a relationship between the apartheid, South Africans and the Netanyahu types, right? They're both about the systematic oppression of people. And let's be real here. Like he went over to Israel both because Bibi needed him, but they both needed each other. It's a mutual parasitism. Like let's not. The larger thing that's going on here is the macroeconomics are shifting. Interest rates are higher. Firms are spending less money on advertising. And if you look at all the firms that basically are boycotting Musk right now, they're all Chinese implicated, right? Biden goes and meets with Xi. They cut all the advertising revenue. I mean, that's what's really going on there.
Well, look, I think that we can temper our enthusiasm and look at these things, with clarity. I mean, for example, Musk, but I don't think anyone on this call is overexcited about Musk. And no one on this call, I think, is overexcited about Trump, for example. I think that we've learned, right? We have some experience and wisdom now. We all were very excited about Trump in 2016. And I think that we've kind of had our hymen broken, as it were. We're now experienced as we were. But maybe that doesn't apply.
Raped. We got grabbed by the pussy.
Nick was being called out by Netanyahu by name, right? Like, let's not forget, how old were you, Nick, when the prime minister of a foreign country came after you? Like, they're clearly threatened by what Nick represents. And this is just very obvious. And it's more like they have to bow down to the shift in the power that's taking place. That's clearly what's going on. I mean, Musk wants advertising attention, but he also wants users, and the users don't like Israel. Like, it's over for them, across the board.
All right. Well, Charles, it seems like you're sounding a more positive note now. But I think that we have to be realistic. And I think that your note of caution is also well taken. I mean,
yeah.
these because again, to Nick's earlier point, this idea of Trump essentially being an egoist, I think that also applies to Musk. So they're egoists, and they kind of like don't want to be told what to do. When you tell them what to do, they're kind of like, well, fuck you. You know what I mean? And the problem is that the problem the Jews are encountering is the Jews are traditionally the people that tell you what to do, right? And so when they start telling Musk and Trump what to do, they get pushback.
Yeah.
I don't. Can someone?
Let's mute some. Yeah,
Please.
there's some. Please, mute yourself, and we can just raise hands in just a little bit. So Nick, let's go back a little bit. So I remember I couldn't find these videos because I searched for them today, but I remember seeing a video in 2017 where it almost reminded me of like public access television, Wayne's World, but nerd version of Wayne's World. And you were a high school senior. And I this is not like a gotcha thing at all. I'm just I definitely I definitely want to know about your trajectory as a very young person. Where you were, if I remember correctly, you were saying, well, Trump, sorry, I'll stop, drop the impression. Guys, yeah, all right. Having sex with women is really gay, guys. I mean, come on, it's just true, no, you didn't say that, but you said that Trump was, okay, we've heard him, he's wild, but we need to go back to, the big boys of the party. But there, you were cautiously critical, let's say. And so that was, I guess, your senior year in high school, and you were maybe a typical young Republican type. And then you're going to BU, you're leaving BU, I expelled or mutual leaving, whatever. And then you become the most notorious, person in America. So what happened? Like, how did that happen? Because when I was that age, I definitely, I'm 45. I mean, the internet was new. We had email, like at our college. There would be terminal computers where you would go and there'd be like a computer and you'd email someone and see if they got back to you. I mean, it just, we didn't have live streams. There was social media wasn't even on anyone's imagination. So it just wasn't an option to become a public figure or a live streamer or, celebrity influencer, et cetera. So what happened? Let's kind of go back to that time in your life.
Well, at that time I was a libertarian. I was just like a basic bitch, constitutionalist libertarian, and it started when I was, I think, 12 years old. And I heard somebody talk about the private sector. And I said, what's the private sector? And I want to get in. And I said, how's the economy work? And so I think I just Googled on my iPad. I was like a proto iPad kid. This is an iPad 2. This is not like what they have now is an iPad 2. And I think I went on YouTube and I looked up, economics. And I saw Thomas Sowell Hoover Institute video. He's on Uncommon Knowledge. That was the first thing I ever watched. Right. And I just went down. That was that rabbit hole. Now it's a very different rabbit hole. But back then it was Thomas Sowell. And I asked my mom to get me Free to Choose by Milton Friedman. I read that, in middle school. And then I read everything. I read all this stuff. But I really got my brain filled up with all this conservative propaganda. I would go in high school in the morning. I'd go to the library and I would go to Jewish World Review, which is a website where they had all the columns. And every day I'd read the Thomas Sowell column, the Walter Williams, Charles Krauthammer, the Judge Napolitano, all those. I would read it every day, and I would read books. I read like Niall Ferguson. I read Thomas Sowell's books and everything. And so I was loaded up on like conservative propaganda. I got my book signed by Garry Kasparov. I got Winter is Coming. And I got it signed at the Chicago CFR thing. He was in town. And,
so anyway. the chess champion and kind of Putin critic, you met him? Or at least briefly?
He had
That's
a book
interesting.
talk over here. And so I was like a neocon, neo-lib, whatever, like defending the Iraq war and like we can't let Iran get the bomb and all this.
Right.
And so initially in the 2016 election, I was a Rand Paul guy, of course, Rand Paul, and then he dropped out. I was a Ted Cruz guy, but I sort of had a series of realizations my senior year of high school and then my freshman year of college, where first I realized that there's a role that the media plays in politics, because when I feel like when you're in high school, you're sort of vaguely conservative. And when you're at that age, you see like these fag kids that support Biden. I forget their names. I'm talking about those two young kids, the Zoomers.
Oh God. Yeah. They're totally,
and like the TikTok Republicans. And when they get in debates, they're like, no, Republican presidents are better than Democrat presidents because, Trump passed the whatever thing. And so you're very ideological. And then I sort of had this realization about structure, structurally how power works. And I said, well, the media is so influential. They make it so that, like, even though I'm a libertarian, like real conservatives can't win elections because of the role of the media. I said, so there has to be some level of handling the media to have power and do what you want with power. So I said, Trump is who the media hates because Trump fights the media. He's discrediting the media. That's the road to libertarian republic runs through defeating the media. So it's Trump. And then I had this realization about demographics. I saw that map that I'm sure we've all seen that said, if only white people vote, if only black people vote, if only, and I said, okay, the immigration trends are such that we're losing Texas in 15 years. Why is nobody talking about this? So initially it was like this tactical thing where I said, I don't love that Trump is a statist, but he can beat the media. He'll close the border. He'll secure the Republican Party. And then, I read Edmund Burke in college. I read Pat Buchanan. And what stood out is in Death of the West, he talks about, I think, in the Denmark Jubilee, he said, what happens when the Muslim protesters on the other side of the river outnumber the police or outnumber the native people? Different civilization. And so it's just sort of this cascading sort of series of things where I was reading deeper and I was, we had sort of like a round table when I was in college. I met the only Trump supporters at Boston University, and it was like 4 of us. I was a neocon. One of them was your biggest fan. One of them was a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. One was like a Steve Pinker guy. And we go, and it was like the alt-right, rabbit hole round table. And anyway, so that was a sort of transformative process that turned me into, for lack of a better word, like a white identitarian, white nationalist, aware that the Holocaust is maybe exaggerated, et cetera, et cetera. And then, what made me a pariah is I just started to become vocal about these things. I got linked up with RSBN, and I met Cassie Dillon. She was with Daily Wire. And I was very insistent on questioning, hey, we're all Trump people. We're all America first. Why are we giving $4 billion a year to Israel? And you can understand, I'm sure, what happened next. And the rest is history. But that's why I give so much credit to Trump, because Trump really, for me, he red-pilled me. Trump and Sam Hyde kind of red-pilled me, changed my consciousness, and made me aware of these things that as a teenager in the suburbs of Chicago, I mean, you could never be aware. I didn't know any Jews. I didn't know really even any black people for that matter. But, you go on the internet and you become aware of how the whole country is changing and the role that those groups are playing.
Yeah. So. We're obviously highly critical of Trump and also kind of analytical. I almost just see him as like a phenomenon at this point. And it's one that I'm distanced from in many ways. But I do think that you were right to say that you got red pilled by Trump. Like it was, despite all the bombacity and stupidity and grab him by the pussy, all that stuff, there was something unique. He incarnated some power or force or emotion unlike anyone else, and I think he continues to do that. And I think actually that's why he's going to win, because he, despite it all, I don't even need to go into the level of stupidity of Donald Trump, speeches and a lot of the movement and things like this. But it's just, even despite it all, he's power. I mean, what I was thinking as well, and I was talking about this a little bit the last time. It's like the deep state or liberals, they're all very concerned. They're very concerned about the loss of democracy, whatever that means exactly. And the loss of decorum and so on and so forth. And so they're going to use what they think are powerful and definitive means. Like they're going to use the legal system to attack Trump. And so we're going to get him on, oh my God, money to a porn star, you look like some crazy old man with a bunch of documents in your bathroom. I mean, they're going to get him on these things, justified and unjustified. They're going to get him on the legal system. But the thing is, it just doesn't matter. DeSantis started collapsing in the polls the moment Donald Trump got indicted, which meant that all of those people who were kind of like, well, let's look around, maybe we can find someone else. They went back to Trump. They circled the wagons. Now he's running away with it because it's like the power of the legal system and bureaucracy and mechanisms and advertising and corporation, all of these like instruments, but they're neutral. They're just like the legal system is just this kind of like, you know what I mean? It's a technical way of attacking someone. Trump is not technical. Trump incarnates some energy. Maybe it's horrible on some level. Maybe it's wonderful in some way, or at least understandable. Maybe it's anger and resentment. Maybe it's actually hope on some other level as well. Whatever it is, it's like the force of belief versus the force of a technical deep state, a robot, effectively. And the belief wins. He's going to just, because they're not confronting him mano a mano. They're not going to defeat him politically, and they're not going to offer a competing vision. Like, this is our vision of the world, socialism or whatever. They don't offer anything. They're simply concerned about democracy. And he's just, despite all of his failings, he's just this power of belief and emotion that is just going to steamroll them. That's at least how I see it. I did not even think I would be saying this not too long ago, but I think he's going to win, and I think it's going to bring upon a political crisis, actually. But I'll just start with that. I think he's going to win because he has.
I would say that the other factor here too, as well, is that the Democrats have obviously completely lost their nuts. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? And I think that when Hillary Clinton lost to Trump, I think it was just a kind of, they were crestfallen and they haven't recovered since. And they've lost all confidence. They're no longer a kind of innovative or bold party. They're running guys like Joe Biden. I mean, come on, dude. You know what I mean? They've just lost their balls effectively. And so the wind is kind of out of their sails, and they're demoralized and they've lost confidence. So I think that that's the other aspect of what's going on here. Anyways, Nick, please.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, I like Trump. I know you're very critical. I love Trump. I love him as a guy. He's like, and that's because he's sort of like the man, this larger than life. I mean, he really is like the dominant force on Earth, like for the last 7 years. In some way.
I don't fucking disagree with that, as crazy as that is to say. I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
And the thing is, he really, and I think that they sell him short because you really have to be a remarkable human being, the kind of stoicism that he has. And I know that people think that he's sort of chaotic or disorganized or something. And I think that's actually true. I think that in terms of his team, there's obviously flaws, that people understand. But as a man, there's because you would look at almost any other figure with that level of notoriety or that level of pressure or power, whatever. And almost all the time there's some deep personal problems going on. It's drugs, it's a scandal, it's this or that. He seems like he's like this superhuman. It's like people forget that he's a man because he has embodied it. What you're talking about, this energy. And as far, I mean, I think you're totally right about him going against the system. I also think it's the extent to which the authority in the country has lost all legitimacy. I mean, that's the biggest crisis I think that he presents, is because the state rests on not just its force, but also its legitimacy. And legitimacy is based on, these things like democracy and everything. And I think what Trump did more than anything, why he's sort of undefeatable, is because he is the lightning rod or the crux of the argument that lays bare the hypocrisies, which we're all sort of vaguely aware of, maybe in the background, that everything's corrupt and that everyone's a hypocrite and the liberals are full of shit and all this stuff. And he kind of gets in the middle of that and shows that the system it's a system pretending to be an institutional, like in some ways, like it's pretending to be a mechanistic system, like you described. We're a nation of laws, not men. Well, that's not really the case when Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and all that stuff's going on. We're a nation of laws, not men. Really? That's why he's being sent up for 700 years. Meanwhile, like the Hunter Biden thing goes on. And, and I don't need to go into a lot of it's Fox News. And yet there is a truth in there, which is that there are these deep hypocrisies and contradictions and double standards where, going up and beating your chest about the rule of law and democracy, it doesn't really work. People say, sacred temple of democracy, fuck you. Really? I mean, after everything that's gone on in the past 10 years or 20 years, 30 years. So for that reason, I think that's a big part of why he's a threat and why they're coming after him. And, Biden's the best representative of what you're describing, because there's no personality there. He's not a person. Everyone recognizes he's the face of a person. He's the face of a president, but there's things working behind him to carry on the day-to-day. And I think that's what people don't like. They want a king. I think that's why almost people identify him with Caesarism, because they recognize that Biden is the prototype of what every leader is in every country and everyone in Congress, which is they're a personal face on an incomprehensible, complex, opaque system that has no accountability, that people can't even understand. People feel like they have no control over their life or society, and they don't like how things are going. And here Trump comes in, and my favorite line from the announcement, he said, "We need someone that will literally take this country and make it great again." Those were his words. We need someone to literally take the country and make it great again. And there's something so magnetic about that idea. Like you said, maybe it represents grievance, maybe it represents hope, that it is within our power, it's within our grasp, that things can change, rather than that we have to resign ourselves to a horrible future, which I think there is a tremendous amount of dread, which really has nothing to do with Trump or Biden, but it's a dreadful gray, literally a gray society. And Trump represents the maybe the number one boomer that can change your oil from an older time, this impervious man, the Bruce Willis, the Clint Eastwood, who's going to go in, kick some fucking ass, take the country, make it great again. Even if we both know that's not what happened at all. It didn't come close to that. And he's, lacks competence in governing and maybe doesn't even want to. That's what he represents.
Okay. What was he like as a person? Like I have never met him. So I've been somewhat close to him, I guess, but I've never, when you were sitting at a dinner table, like, what did you talk about? Like, what did he talk about? Like, I don't know, sports or women, or what was he like?
UFC.
Well, he's very
UFC.
Yeah. Well, he does love the fighting, if you've seen him at these things, but he's incredibly charismatic. I'll just say that, he's quick, he's likable, he asks questions, very much like what you see on TV. He's a quintessential businessman in the sense that, you've met entrepreneurial types and you know the vibe they give off. And so he kind of had that going. But there was a turn. So we talked about a lot of things. Like, what was really funny is first he tried to, I noticed this, he called Kanye by his name, Ye, which was interesting because I feel like, anyone that's 75 years old doesn't know that Kanye changed his name to Ye. They don't even, they would
they
see
don't know
him
who
and be
Kanye
like, hey, are
West
you that
is.
rapper?
Yeah, right.
Are you one of those rappers?
I was calling him
Jay-Z?
for like a month.
Yes. Yeah, we did
exactly.
Yeah.
And,
I'm glad he didn't call him the N-word.
That would be worse. Yeah. So I mean, we were with him. People who were fans of him would come up to him and say, "Yo, Kanye, can I get a picture?"
Yeah.
And he'd say, "Well, I will if you call me Ye." You know, but even his fans hadn't caught on, but Trump knew. And that's like one of those like how to win friends and influence people shit, like, you know, that he knew that. And the first way he tried to engage Ye was he said, and there's pictures that have been taken since, I talked about it a year ago, he has this iPad that controls the music on the patio of Mar-a-Lago. He's obsessed with it. He loves DJing for the part. It's a party every night at the Mar-a-Lago patio, which is like a restaurant because it's a club, you know. And he DJs. He picks the playlist when, you know, and it's like the King's Court, and he's in the middle in a velvet rope sectioned off part playing the music. And so the first way he engages Ye is he says, "Hey, I have this iPad. It's unbelievable. It controls the music. You can pick any song. It has every song." So he has Ye pick a song to play for the dinner, and he starts talking to him. And I was almost mortified at the start because he engages him with like the black voter pitch. He's telling about opportunity zones and the what was it, the First Step Act, and I'm
Platinum
like, dude,
plan,
like,
yeah.
Now at that time, it's like, when I showed up on the first day at the office in LA with Kanye, he was drawing swastikas in a notebook. Okay, literally, he's like drawing, and he's fully red pilled. And so we pull up, and Trump's giving him the black voter pitch. I'm like, "Mr. President, like, we're way past. With all due respect, this is not your ordinary black Republican. Okay,
Right.
You're not talking to Larry Elder. We're way past that. Okay, we're levels ahead of that." And anyway. So that's how it started. And, you know, Ye brought this other black guy who's, you know, some affirmative action, like engineer. And, you know, so Trump strikes up a conversation with this guy, and he's an idiot. And me and him start talking. We're talking about True Social. And he asked me about the DeSantis thing because I sort of insinuated, you know, I liked his attack on DeSantis, which had occurred a few days prior. But there was this turn, anyway, to arrive at my point, there was this turn in the dinner where Trump became hostile, because I think he became aware, it's a long story, but he basically became aware that, you know, maybe something wasn't necessarily right. Now, I want to say for the record that it was not, you know, everyone said it was set up. Everyone said that, you know, we tried to trap him. That's not true. But Trump had reason to believe that it was like that. It's a long story why that was, but he got a call in the middle of the dinner because of a clerical mistake. And it was a heads up, like, "Hey, maybe they're trying to mess with you." And so Trump became hostile. And when I say he flipped on a dime, it was unbelievable. He started telling the story about that rapper that got locked up in, I think it was Sweden, and then Trump secured his release.
Oh, yeah.
I forget the whole
that,
story.
Yeah.
I think it was
Lil Nas or something. Yeah, or something like that.
No, it was
okay. Well,
Kodak Black, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't even know some of these
ASAP
people,
Rocky. Someone just said, yeah, ASAP Rocky.
That's right, ASAP Rocky. And so Trump launched it. And now the whole dinner, he had his presidential face on, and he was just being the president. He was very nice. He starts telling the story and starts dropping 100 F-bombs, like, which is weird because this is the president. You know, there's some decorum. So he starts telling the story and goes, "So I told them, listen, you fucking motherfucker, we're going to," just like crazy. Everyone's like, "Whoa, like what just changed?" Well, anyway, he tells a few stories like this. And the moral of all of these stories about that one and LeVar Ball and Kim Kardashian, the moral of all these stories, he told 3 stories about Black people that were not grateful to him. Black people that he did something for them and they weren't grateful. And there was a very not so clear subtext. Yeah. And, you know, and at that point, Ye asked him if he would be the running mate. Because, you know, when we were driving up there, Ye was like, "This is going to be great. I'm going to ask Trump to be my running mate." And everyone said, "Oh, that's funny." And he's like, "No, but it's not a joke, though. I mean it. I want him to be my running mate." So and he kind of forgot that he wanted to ask that. And Karen Jorno was at the dinner. She was kind of kicking him under the table and saying, like, "Hey, remember what you came here to ask, and remember to say your line." So Ye said, "Hey, would you be my vice president?" And Trump flipped. He folded his arms, which you've seen him do sometimes. He kind of leaned over the table and he's like, "Listen, you know, you're a winner. You can win at a lot of things, but you'll never win at this. you know, maybe you're good at the music and this and that, and you could do other things, but you'll never beat me. You'll never win at this. You can't. And then he turns to me and he goes, tell him he can't win. I know you're a smart guy. Tell him he can't win. I know you work for him. Tell him he can't win. He lost his mind. And, you know, it's weird saying it, but it felt like he was going to get up and start punching us in the face. Like, so he just exudes this like a mobster. I would compare it to like Tony Soprano. It felt like Tony Soprano getting up and getting in our face and intimidating, like real like mobster shit. So that was sort of like and like I said, there was this split where 1 minute he was like the car salesman, nicest guy you've ever met. You know, he knows to call him yay, and he's a very nice guy. Flips on a dime and says, fuck this and fuck that. And he says, tell your ex-wife, she's a disgusting human being. He told Ye. Next time you see her, tell her she's a disgusting human being because I released her friend and she voted for Biden, and going Tony Soprano. So, I mean, he really is like a force. He's a force of nature. He's not even a human. He's like a force.
It's kind of scary to be around him when he's in that mode. He kind of gets he gets into that like warrior mode where he's going to kill someone. Yeah. Wow.
Beast mode, straight up. It was awesome. And I was just like, this is awesome. You know, this is awesome.
So did you do what Trump said? Did you actually tell Ye that he can't win?
No, I mean, look, because you got to imagine, I mean, these are both of I love both of these people. These are both of my personal heroes. Right? They both like me. I just got to know them. So I just didn't even say anything. I was just like, please don't make me say. I was like, well, I don't know, you know, because I'm like, I couldn't say anything to Ye because Ye brought me there.
Yeah, sure.
It'd be very disloyal for me to be there. And, you know, so I'm trying to be Ye's wingman, but also it's like, this is like my father's like Darth Vader saying, you know, hey, do this. But so I just I was like, yeah, well, I don't know, you know.
Did you think that the Trump movement was kind of over? Like that announcement speech, which I guess took place around a year ago or so, was just terrible. I actually remember people pointing out Spencer and Fuentes had the same opinion. It was just like no energy. He's just a typical Republican now. What's the point? I mean, did you think that Trump was over, and you thought that if there were to be a vessel for this dark energy, it might be Kanye West?
Well, you know, it's here's the thing. I sort of knew from the outset, like a lot of people did, that Ye had ran before. You know, he ran before, and they didn't even get on the ballot in most states. And so I recognized that it was sort of a long shot, you know, that he would win the nomination to become. But I did think it was possible, and we were seriously putting together a serious campaign that would win. And I honestly, I believe that he could win in the future. I think that if he ran in 28 or some other time, because Ye has the same intuition that Trump does. And I know that, you know, a lot of people sort of roll their eyes at that. They say, oh, really? You think this rapper's a genius? I do. I think that, you know, any serious person has to look at his legacy, which is that he has been at the top of the music industry for 20 years. Who else does that?
Yeah.
Who else puts out an album, 10, 11 albums, and they go number one? And he's the biggest streaming artist, top 5, and he didn't put out an album last year. Not only that, go into any mall and you will see shoes influenced by the Yeezy. What other musician does both? Or one of them? Very, very few and far between that has that kind of cultural influence and staying power and dominance. So he is a genius. I really believe that. And I know that because he knew things about politics, even without knowing much about politics, that most people would never understand in a lifetime. Most political junkies, if it slapped them across their stupid fat fucking face, they wouldn't get it, you know, because he just has some wisdom. But anyway, the big idea, I thought, is that maybe that would snap Trump out of it. I thought that what Trump needed at that time was an opponent, because what had happened is that Trump, that's what had happened was Trump, I think, became complacent. And I think that he was low energy and the speech sucked. He needed a foil. He needed a dialectic. In 16, the dialectic was him versus everyone else, and that made him what he was. what he sort of became this Flanderized character, and he had been captured and assimilated into the RNC. And yeah, I thought it was basically doomed. I thought even if he wins, it's not going to be worth it. I was looking forward to DeSantis announcing, and I actually commended him for attacking DeSantis. At the dinner, I said, look, I said, when you called them DeSanctimonious, not only were you in the right, but also I said, this is what got you elected. People aren't here for McDaniel and McCarthy and all that. I said, they're here for you. And, you know, I said, the moment that was awesome is when you raised your hand at the first debate and said you'd run as an independent. I said, because that's the kind of deal making that we need at the table, not the sort of we'll get him next time, live to fight another day bullshit Republicans do and lose every year. And anyway, so when I sort of jumped on the Ye bandwagon, and Ye agreed too. Me and Ye both love Trump. Ye loves Trump. He's his hero. And he thinks he's an incredible politician. And Ye said that, you know, either Trump would be his running mate or he'd be Trump's running mate. And even if he didn't win, he would endorse Trump. And I sort of have the same idea that if, you know, ideally, honestly, Ye would win. And then we would have this president that loves Hitler. On the contrary, you know, worst case scenario, he drops out and endorses Trump after he brings the beast back out of Trump. And so,
right.
But people didn't understand that. They said, well, you're disloyal to Trump or whatever. And it's like, no, that just like with Andrew Yang, this is something that is going to throw a wrench into this totally stagnant sort of system and maybe produce a better outcome. That's
I actually understood it. It's funny because I was so used to being against everything that the right did out of my, you know, contrarian instinct, or I was just fed up with MAGA and all that kind of stuff. But I you know, and I didn't join it exactly, but I definitely showed a lot of respect because I was like, he's going on stage in a mask and he's doing all this crazy shit, but that's like great because that's what you need. You need to be fucking crazy. You need to like call up the dark energy. You need to go there in order to be relevant because otherwise you're it's not like you want to calculate and do a little of this or that. No, you need to go full dark side in order to win because otherwise you're going to lose. And so I did see that with Ye. I surprised myself. I'm not a fan of his music. You're long, you know, we have differing music tastes to say the least. But I just saw it and it was calling up something really authentic and real. And I just loved it because that's what we need. America's going down the fucking tubes. America sucks. I mean, our culture is horrible. Everyone's unhappy. Everything's way too expensive. Like we're looking for a savior. Everyone wants that. And again, the left just refuses to present it. You know, like I'll defend Biden to some degree. I think he's a decent guy. His presidency up until the Israel stuff, I thought was decent. Actually, I'm glad we got out of Afghanistan. You know, child tax credit, whatever the fuck. You know, it's good. But again, he doesn't represent anything, as you were saying. He's just this old guy, kind of sort of managing a system that's beyond his control. And I think we're in an age of anxiety in the 2020s and I think beyond. I think we're in an age where we're in a kind of post-religious, post-Christian age, but not in the sense that everyone's becoming atheist. I think in the sense that everyone is looking for a savior. I just think that's very true. And if you can't offer that, if all you offer is we're going to not appoint a conservative Supreme Court justice, or we're going to protect democracy, whatever the fuck that means at this point in time, you're just going to get bulldozed by something where it's the power of belief. I mean, I do think that Trump will probably disappoint you, but he carries that messianic energy with him. And that is something that's very real. That's something that people need in this day and age. And so I have a undying respect for people who are willing to carry that energy forward.
You know, on a less profound note, some people say that comedy is dead, and I think that there's great evidence for that. SNL hasn't been funny for 20 years. But that appearance with you and Yay on Alex Jones was the funniest fucking thing I've seen.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was just hilarious, man. So I enjoyed that. I appreciate it. So if nothing else, that was just an epic moment of comedy that I don't think that can be replicated or reputed.
Yeah, I like when Alex
was just
Jones
so
was like
strange and
like,
perfect.
we know that Hitler is truly a puppet of the lizard people, but we don't like Hitler. And then Kanye just called him on it. He was like, no. I like Hitler.
Yeah. Well, the best part, he goes, he goes, so you like the uniforms? No.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of things. Which is so, like, that's such a perfect sense. No, there's a lot of things I like about Hitler. Which is and they sort of out Alex Jones. Well, yeah, and I agree with you. And this is one of the reasons why we come from very different places. You're the Nietzschean, and I know, not a Christian by any stretch, and all that. But I think one of the reasons why maybe there's a mutual respect is because I think we both have a contempt for the ordinary and for especially for like the stodgy conservative. Because I feel like that's one of the worst things that happened to Trumpism is that when Trump came out in 2016, he was a billionaire celebrity with a gold tower and from New York. And now it's become just as campy and cringe and lame as the old Republican Party. You get these people that go there and they're like, I like Trump, I'm on the Trump train. It's like, so we're just doing that all over again. We're just doing Reagan again and all that crap. And so a big part of why I like Ye is, like you say, he's cool. He's cool. He's different. He's forward thinking. People may not get it. People may not like it, but it's different. It's forward. It's radical. He's not, he's a true rock star. Like, he's not a pussy at all. He'll go on there and, every other conservative will say, oh, let's check in on the Magic Americans, and then, Ye, who's a billionaire celebrity with everything to lose, will come out and say, DEFCON 3 on the Jews. I love Hitler for many reasons, and all that. And I'm with you. I look at those figures and I'm with you on the power of true belief. There's nothing more powerful than true belief. And, people that can harness that, I want to be a lieutenant. I want it to rub off on me. I want to be a part of that. Other people, they're like, how exactly is that going to win? How are people, and they want to vote for DeSantis because they're like, let's calculate the optimal candidate using the Nate Silver algorithm. Like, fuck you. You don't get it.
It's a 100% agreement on that. Yes. So, okay. So what happened? What happened? Because it kind of went out with a whimper and not a bang, the Ye campaign. Yeah. What happened? Did he lose his nerve? Was it just impossible to raise money, or what happened?
Well, it was honestly a series of things. So the timeline, at least with my involvement, is I got out there on November 17th. This is after the DEFCON tweet and the Tucker Carlson thing. So I got out there November 17th. The dinner was on the 22nd. Tim Pool was 1 year ago today, so November 29th. And the Alex Jones thing, I think, was the week after. So by the time of the Alex Jones, so after Alex Jones, he got banned on Twitter. He did the Alex Jones thing, and there was this sort of like this, I don't want to use this word, maybe it's this insensitive, but there was sort of this like, he was really feeling himself. I almost want to say manic, but I know he wouldn't like that word. But so like we do the Alex Jones thing, and he loved it. And we jump on the jet, we fly to Miami, and we meet with this guy, and then we're driving 100 miles an hour in a Tesla down from, actually it was in Boca. We drove from Boca to Miami, and he's blasting his songs. Why doesn't this fucking thing go louder? We're blasting, pick a song. I'm telling him songs. He's making videos and posting them. And then he posted the swastika, and then he got banned. And, so after that, it became really difficult because basically the reality began to set in. And, the thing that I love about Ye, which he's truly able to do, and most people are not able to do this, is he has a sort of like unrealistic opinion of the world. You know, he'd be like, well, we want to run the campaign and not take donations. We want to run the campaign and do no social media. Kind of like this magical thinking, which you need to be creative in any pursuit. But at the same time, you know, reality has a way of reasserting itself. And so there is a fine line with these sort of imaginative, unrealistic, magical thinking, but also then it does tend to crash on the rocks of reality. And that is sort of what happened, because his money was tied up. He couldn't find any lawyer to represent him because of what happened. I mean, literally couldn't find a single lawyer. And so the money was running out, had no representation, had no social media. Like, it was really bad. He was in the maximum pressure, maximum sanction situation. And it just kind of became difficult to move on. Like, we couldn't work out of the office anymore. And he had fired the entire team he literally fired everybody except for me. And like I said, no lawyer, running out of money. And then he got married. Because the girl, you know, in that song, he says he released a song after the Alex Jones thing, and he actually couldn't even publish it. The Donny Hathaway estate, he sampled the Donny Hathaway song after the Alex Jones interview, and the Donny Hathaway estate wouldn't clear the song. They wouldn't publish it on the streaming services because of what happened on Alex Jones. So he couldn't even put out a song. And anyway, in the song, he said, wake up to an "I can't do this anymore" text. After the Alex Jones thing, his girl texted him and said, "I can't do this anymore." And he had to win her back and everything. And anyway, they got married. And basically after he got married, I didn't see him again for a long time, for a couple months. And by January, he was telling me, you know, I think actually maybe we'll just do a change of plans, run for a different office, run another time. Now me, I was in a position where I was sort of the last man standing. I was the only guy left on the political team. I said, I have some resources at my disposal, and I have, you know, a Rolodex here, and I have the connection with him. I said, I'm going to move heaven and earth, if possible, to make it happen. And that way I have no regrets. That way I can't look back and say, if only I tried harder, you know, Ye could have been the president. So I really did try to make it happen, but, you know, you get it. They put maximum pressure, and it's difficult to move. And you can't move like you can when you're not canceled. And so, I mean, I put some meetings together. We interviewed campaign managers, and we built a website and everything. And I saw him again once or twice after in this year in 2023. And then in May, he left the country, and that was that. I mean, we had even in April and May, we were working on a website, and it was going really well. Milo jumped back in and fucked up caused like just a lot of drama. And then Ye left the country. And then that was that. You know, what's really funny though, is so me and Milo, we got into it over in the group text, you know, because Milo got fired in like December, and I basically caused that. And, you know, Milo found out because I bragged about it, and he lost his mind. He came back for a vengeance, and he tried to force me out, but Ye didn't want that. And so me and Milo got in this biblical fight on the group text, and me and him are going back and forth, you know, just ripping each other a new asshole in front of Ye and the CEO of Yeezy and Bianca and like the whole crew, wow. The whole fucking company. Me and him are going at it in the group text. And by the end of it, Ye, after like 3 hours after the dust settles, he goes, "Thank you both. That was very entertaining." And he goes around and says he wanted to do a reality show with like me and Milo and the crew. So
well, that would be something.
And he's like Trump in that regard. He likes when people fight it out. He likes to play people against each other and, you know, get that kind of court intrigue. Anyway, so that was a fun little tidbit.
Yeah.
But that's what happened.
So I presume Milo, that's any sort of bridge has been burnt to smithereens, I would imagine at this point.
Me and Milo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. Okay. Well, what do you, I don't even know if I want to talk about Milo, to be honest. maybe there are other better things to talk about. He's just a really evil sociopath, in my humble opinion.
He's an odious human being. I mean, just like, well, you know what's funny? He brought people into the campaign to replace like other people that were there, and then they all turned on him because he was stealing. They all flipped on him because he was so corrupt and so like such a piece of shit. The people that he brought in to try and screw me turned on him. So, you know, but that's the story. He's like a gypsy. I say this, I tell everybody, you know, he's like this wandering Jew archetype. I'm sure you have had the experience. Not all Jews are like this, but there is an archetype of like the Jew gypsy archetype where they just sort of, they literally are wanderers. They're like nomadic scammers, and they sort of go from patron to patron with a grift or a scam. And it's literally like when that grift is up, they flee town, they find a new patron, and he's very, you know, so yeah.
That's someone mentioned Patrick Casey as well. Yeah, I mean, it is funny. Because I remember talking about that issue with Joe Rogan, where Milo was basically justifying like being raped by a priest as a young boy, and you know, I didn't say anything that I don't think anyone else said. I just basically said like this is not funny, and you're not joking, in fact. And so you know, that was it. But he seemed to have it out for me. He was just waiting with his dagger, and then you know, there's the now legendary rant to end all rants,
which I love. We all love that, by the way.
Well, okay. I'm glad you liked it. Someone did, not me. I mean, look, it is what it is. I mean, you know, it's like, I guess it's now kind of over, where it's like, look, everyone has really bad moments, right? And that was a time of extreme pressure, and I was just like, fuck it, we're doing this, no, you know, and you know, that's what it was. It was nothing more than that, in fact. But anyway, for him to kind of like wait 2 years to like finally like, you know, get me with this, you're dealing with a bad person, because I think with most healthy people, at some point you get over things, you know. Like you've said shit about me, I've said shit about you. At some point it's just like, you know, time moves forward, you know. That's, and for a sociopath like that, I don't think they ever get over it. But anyway, that's more than
the dissident right is full of sort of despicable characters, but I mean, that guy takes the cake. He's sort of explicitly and proudly just an evil Machiavellian, conniving, like openly terrible person who's bragging about, you know, having all this damning material on people, and he's going to release it. It's just like, who the fuck is this guy? You know?
I think even giving him too much credit to say he's evil. I think he's unwell. I think he's an unwell, sort of sick person. And, you know, I actually became close with him over a period of a couple of years. You know, we were friendly, and what I saw was just a sort of pathetic, sad person, you know, like a very superficial person, broke, and constantly needing to sort of like buy people's affection, or like, you know, this is clearly a deeply wounded person from a very early time. And what I noticed is that he was somebody who, you know, like me, I feel like I'm Italian. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm like, you know, what you see is what you get. If you like it, I like you. If you don't, fuck you. You know, I don't care. And with him, it was always trying to like earn trust or earn friendship through this persona, this very affected persona of, I'm rich. Oh, I don't care about anything. Oh, I'm, you know, I'm edgy. And it's a very juvenile thing. It's very like fucking high school energy. But, you know, people that have trauma early on, they sort of never get over that. Never mature emotionally. And so it was always like, and even with the Ye thing, that was something that he saw, and this is also speaks to the sort of psychopathy. He saw that as something that I wanted, something that I sort of coveted, because we saw at that time that Ye was trending that way. And, you know, how I got Ye's number is I went through Alex Jones' producer, but she doesn't like me. Alex Jones, producer, has not liked me for years, which is whatever. But I knew she had the number because she's a fan of Owen Benjamin, and Ye said something that he knew Owen and Alex. So I said, oh, she must have the number. She hates me. I know Milo has a relationship with her. So I said, hey, Milo, could you get that number? And so Milo developed this and got the number. And once he had that, he sort of used it, because I coveted that, to try and gain control over me and try to sort of get me to kneel and put me in this sort of collection of, of instruments, of people that can be used. Because I think that's sort of what defines a psychopath is instrumentalizing people for your own ends. And and really what caused the tension on the team is that I would go out there and I was kind of like, no, like, I'm not here to be your slave. And you don't own me because you did me this favor or anything. But he didn't see it that way. He saw it as, I did this favor for you. Now you have to do whatever now I own you and whatever. And there was a moment when he was like, well, I'll get you, I'll send you home. I'll get you fired. And I said, fuck you. I'll buy the ticket myself. You think I need this? I don't need this. I'm an independent person, whatever. But that was really the cause of the friction. And anyway, but this is sort of gets to the mentality of a psychopath. It's not a person who is like an evil, villainous figure. It's actually a very sad, small person that turns into this. And I remember, I've seen him sort of thrashing around in irrelevancy lately and attacking me. And it's like, this is just a very deeply wounded person. You almost feel bad. It's like, can we give this person a friend? Like, can this be a person who could be healed or something? But obviously someone to be avoided at all costs. But I mean, I got a lot of use out of him. I sort of, maybe I'm the
you maybe got the most
psychopath.
use out of him. Yeah. That's interesting. Let's do this. There were a couple other topics that I was interested in, but we actually maxed out our capacity for listeners. First time we've done that. I think we know the reason for that. If you have a question for Nick, you can raise your hand and then I can call on you. I will. I'll just look here to see who we have. All right, Steve C., you're up first.
Hey, Nick. Big fan.
Hey.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting this at all. I just raised my hand. But I'll just say, you guys have been a great influence on my life. Just listening to you guys, and Nick, you brought me back to church. After 10 years of being away. So, and Richard, especially more recently, I've been listening to your talks and your rants, just about pan-Europeanism and that type of thing. And I think that's a really good thing for this movement in general. So I just want to say thank you guys. I know your work sometimes goes unappreciated. So thank you very much, and thank you for having this talk.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Let's go to Paul O.R. Paul Orr.
Guys, question to you both. Do you feel that after World War II, the unipolar world we've lived in, has the unipolar power been the United States, or has it actually been Israel using the United States?
After 1945?
Yeah, post-World War II.
Well, I would say post-World War II, we definitely had a bipolar world. So, I mean, the Soviet Union, by let's say the 60s, mid-60s, I think it was clear that the Soviet Union wasn't going to overwhelm the United States with production or something. And in fact, it was very behind. By the 70s, that was just abundantly clear. But it also had a tremendous amount of legitimacy. I mean, the new left started leaving them by the late 60s, but you still would look to Moscow as a place of they're leading the world. They're moving forward. At the very least, you would fear Moscow due to nuclear weapons. So I think it was definitely a bipolar world. Yeah, I mean, I think Krauthammer is correct. After the fall of the Soviet Union, it wasn't like the United States controlled everything or anything like that, but there was no other competing vision. And I actually think there still is no other competing vision. I mean, I'll hear some of these highlights of like Jackson Hinkle, and he's like, people hate America, we're turning to Russia for. It's like, listen, what are you talking about? I mean, I don't discount Russia, but the idea that there's a vision for how to do things and how you want to live, where you're getting your culture from, I still don't think there is a huge amount of competition. Now, I mean, I know a lot of white nationalists, et cetera, want to say, Zionist occupied government, et cetera. I mean, look, getting Israel was iffy all the way through. I mean, Herzl was going to Kaiser Wilhelm, going to the Rothschild family, writing books, and I mean, it wasn't like a dominant force just placed it. And there's no doubt that it had tremendous influence, et cetera. There's no doubt that it was the fact that Herzl was even having conversations with the Rothschild family shows that it has tremendous influence. But I don't think that we live in a like Zionist occupied world or it's like a unipolar power. I mean, I think it does need America to survive, period, end of statement. And so in that sense, it's not hegemonic. Now, does it have tremendous influence through like media, Hollywood, to be frank, blackmail, compromise? I mean, no doubt. But it still is, and I think this is something very typical of Jews in general and Zionism in particular. It exists within a power structure, and it can have tremendous influence. It can control it, at least seemingly, but it's not really the alpha. It can't exist without us. And I think some of this a lot of white nationalists get into this, Jews control everything. I'm not saying this to be like politically correct or something. I'm saying it to be accurate. You can, respond to that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, certainly not after World War II. And you're right, it's a bipolar world order. And Israel doesn't have the same dominance over the State Department. And you really see it's in the 60s and 70s when the names start to change. When you look at like the Carnegie Endowment and the CFR, and there's a very clear transition from Anglo names to Jewish names around the 70s. And of course, even Eisenhower and Kennedy were more resistant to Israel than Johnson and future presidents. So the two premises are, one, it's a bipolar world order. Two, America wasn't dominated by the Zionists until later. And even still, they're not a pole because they cannot project power on a global scale like the United States can. The United States is the pole, they just influence it. But they're not a pole.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think we're about to see another episode in the Jewish story. And I don't know. I mean, what is there? There's some myth, David's kingdom lasted 80 years and went into decline. I think
the answer is
go ahead.
The answer is that they became powerful and became dominant in the country, evidently, right? But their power seems to be on the wane. I mean, kind of obviously. I mean, and there's a lot of factors to that. I think that some of these big players like Trump and Musk have contributed to their decline. There's no question about it, even if kind of like unwittingly, right? So I think that I think that they're still very powerful players in the world, in this country, and in the world, but they've been humbled to some extent, and I would have to guess that trend will continue. I don't see it reversing, because I think kind of the cat is out of the bag. I think that the country is becoming more white nationalist, frankly. One thing I was going to remark, though, is I think that, and maybe this goes back to an earlier part of our discussion, is that I think that, again, I think that it does seem likely that Trump will be president
there you go. Okay.
as both Richard I think that Trump will be the next president, as both Richard and Nick are predicting. And I think that Musk will play a critical role in that. I mean, not just in having changed the climate, but now, a kind of free Twitter that will invite Trump back on, just it creates a kind of clear road for him. And I think that I don't know that we'll see the sort of same kind of crazy zeal tree that we saw in 2016. In a way, I mean, you guys were talking about, you need this sort of passion and this spirit for messianic energy to get Trump back in. And I think that that's present, but I think it's matured. I think that people have become wise and more sort of cynical. And there's kind of maturation, as much as it's kind of boomer and it's not totally what we love, and there is a kind of inherent conservatism to it. It seems more assured and more like, okay, we know the score now. This is not new information, and we're going to put Trump back in office. And so I think there'll be less wildness, but there will be a stronger kind of robust, more mature and assured movement behind Trump this time, is my sense,
I agree with you to some extent. I definitely think that many people within MAGA have understood that they lost the Trump administration with the transition. And in those 3 months that you have after winning the election, you need to just appoint the bureaucracy of loyalists. And I think they're going to do this. A lot of people say things like, no one will work for him and whatever. That just means that you won't work for him, the person saying that. There are thousands of people in this country who might not be as couth as, people in Washington at the moment, but they're smart. They got a law degree. They can do this. They're, the guy like that Oklahoma senator who was like an MMA fighter who challenged someone to fight on the floor. I mean, they're more like him, but it doesn't actually mean that they're necessarily less intelligent. It might mean that they don't have really a vision.
Basically, the people he should have enlisted the first time around, essentially.
Definitely, but he didn't. But they've stayed true to them. So I think there actually will be plenty of people. You've never heard their names because their name is Buck and they live in Oklahoma, but again, I say this as a compliment. It's not like they're less intelligent than the guy who, has a master's degree from Harvard or something. So, but yeah, I think they will appoint that, and I think there's going to be a lot of vengeance. I'm not sure there's going to be any policy vision, but I think there's going to be a lot of vengeance. So it's interesting. Alberto, do you want to jump in? I'll just go right down in order. You got a question or comment?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me, right?
You're kind of roboting, but try it.
Okay. Sorry.
There you go.
I just got new internet set up. But this is a question for both Richard, Mark, and Nick. Just generally speaking, what do you think of Americans for Prosperity backing this idiot Nikki Birdbrain Haley for president? Pretty stupid pick, I'd say, by a libertarian billionaire. But what do you guys think of that? Big fan of both.
I'll let you go. Yeah.
It's not surprising. Well, I think it's they're coalescing behind her, and they're going for South Carolina. I actually heard this from Charlie Kirk. I think he's right about this. That Trump's going to win Iowa, he's going to win New Hampshire, but South Carolina is her home state, and that's the first one of the first four. And same thing happened with Biden in the 2020 primary. If you remember that he really struggled in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. But it was South Carolina that put him over the top and put him on track. And so some are saying that she has sort of been anointed. They're saying DeSantis it's not going to be him. So they're coalescing around her. And, it's funny about Americans for Prosperity. I actually know the guy that runs it. His son and I have beef going back a long time. Cabot Phillips, he's with Campus Reform. I think he's with Turning Point now, but his father runs that outfit. And they're with, they met at the Leadership Institute. Him his father and mother met at Morton Blackwell's Leadership Institute. So it's no surprise. It's not surprising at all. It's conservative establishment stuff.
Well, also they're just going to continue to try to defeat Trump with one of these people. Like they would have liked, they probably would have preferred DeSantis and things like that, but they're now going with Nikki Haley. Yeah, it's just not going to win. There's just there's no point to it. Ateos, you're up.
Yeah. Hey, Nick. I really appreciate, that you're one of the few that can see through, all the Jewish ops, for all the silly insults you get about your sexuality. You do have an uncanny ability to see past all like the nude bodybuilder posting, targeting the young and feeble-minded on Twitter. So that's actually pretty refreshing. And it's nice that you can see the long game. Not many people can do that. I'm specifically talking about the, when everyone wanted to respond to all the dog whistles that were going on about the anti-Muslim kind of rhetoric you saw from characters like Ben Shapiro. It was nice to see that there was someone on Twitter who was able to, kind of hold their ground and to see that it was a golden opportunity to kind of dogpile on Israel. So, I'm thankful that there's someone out there that can do that. We do have, speaking personally, we have disagreements about like Christianity and stuff, and I think that's a pretty big topic to get into. But just to quickly just leave it there, I just wanted to say that there's a lot of things we could disagree about, but I think that there's a lot in common too. So that's all.
Nice. Yeah. Well, thanks.
They wanted to basically get white nationalists on board with Israel because it was all 2000. It's very funny, actually. A number of us were hanging out here in Montana in August, and we went to this honky tonk effectively that's a mile down the road, and all the people were singing like the songs of their youth or something in karaoke. There are a lot of people can attest here. It was remarkable how good looking the women were. A lot of cut off jeans and tank tops. It was remarkable. Fashy Mama can attest.
IRL girls, not e-girls.
Right. Yeah. No e-girls. No one there was
no e-girls. Yeah.
Flesh. Yeah. But what was I saying? Oh yeah. So they were singing karaoke and they're singing all the songs of their youth. And so there are all these guys singing these like Bush era anthems. And I don't even remember them, but it was actually just kind of crazy. Like, we're going to throw a grenade in your hijab and we're going to throw you back to Arabia. Cause like, we'll string you up on a rope. They were singing all this like Bush era stuff. And we were like, we lived through fascism and we weren't even aware of it. And I was like criticizing. It was kind of a weird phenomenon, but they wanted
it's just a testament to how sissy things have gotten since is probably
true. Yeah.
There, right?
But it definitely is. But anyway, they wanted to do that again with Israel. And I think actually, most people who are serious just spat it back in their face. They're like, I'm not going to attack the Palestinians for being Islamo-fascist. Fuck you. Yeah. If any people deserve some sort of sympathy, it's them, for God's sake. They're not a bunch of theocratic Nazis. I mean, what the fuck are you talking about? I think smart people were just like, no, we're not doing it. And they actually had to go to other tacks. But I think they really wanted to do that after October 7th. It's like, let's just fire them up, red meat, Muslim bashing. You're free to bash the Muslims, guys. You've got the M card is yours, and people didn't buy it.
The kosher bigotry.
Yeah.
Well, and they were doing it in the dissident right space with all those Bronze Age pervert guys, and it's so transparent. Just this, well, hey guys, that's not really our fight, but there's Muslims over here, and I pointed out the contradiction that all of that notwithstanding, what do you think happens when Israel annexes Gaza? Where do you think those people are coming? People tried to pivot and pander to nativists and make it about immigration. They said, oh, well, we're isolationists now. This is a domestic problem, and the domestic problem is the Muslim protesters. hey, genius, who do you think's coming here after Israel's done with their war? Like, we've all seen how the story ends every single time. So yeah, I totally agree, and I go so autistic about that on Twitter and on my show with these people. This because there is clearly a network, that Bronze Age pervert crowd. They're all Jews, they're all Zionists, and that has been a thing in the white nationalist circle for a while. Like, clearly there are some white nationalists that, like, they roll with Jews. Like, some Jews support white nationalism, and they don't like when you criticize Israel. It is what it is. So
I think you have to. I think you have to demonstrate that in order to prove that you're serious. Because otherwise you're just playing some little game. You know, like, you'll let us attack Muslims and blacks or something.
Right.
You know, well, thanks. You know, we can do that now. Oh, good. You know, and first off, I think I probably speak for you too. Is I'm kind of over this, like, black crime or what, you know. It's like, guys, let's talk about something. Let's talk about something that's interesting. I mean, it's just to dwell on, like, people who are misbehaving just to, like, be the hall monitor of the African American community. I mean, yeah. I mean, just I'm done.
Well, it's just dwelling on something we've all known forever. Did you know blacks commit crime? No.
Yes.
I never heard that before. Wow.
Right.
Rediscovering ancient stereotypes, like, they're real. That's true.
Right. Okay, Alex's iPhone. I hope this isn't my son. Go on. Okay.
I was just wondering, what's your perspective on AI during wartime? Specifically about photographs. You know, I'm sure that everyone here has seen pictures that were not real and that we thought were real. Everyone here. I mean, I'm sure of it. And I just wanted to get Nick's perspective on that. I mean, I've heard yours, Richard. So
yeah, sure.
Just
yeah, well, I'm sure it's legitimate, but you know what? I don't think it's really that much different, because I feel like, you know, there's all kinds of atrocity propaganda that precedes AI, and it's in the medium of that day. You know, the medium today is digital imagery, and now we have sophisticated tools that can forge that. And I don't think it's any different than, you know, the difference is that it's more compelling. Anyone can look at it and say, oh, you know, there it is. Seeing is believing. But fundamentally, I don't think it's anything new. Before that, there were rumors. Now there's this. So
yeah, I think that's true. I think there's definitely, I mean, I've said this before, but I think someone serious in leadership needs to address this, because, like, the potential, I've just mentioned this as an example, the potential of an AI image of Vladimir Putin saying, I have just sent a nuclear weapon to Warsaw or something. Like, again, that could be debunked in 30 minutes. Half of the people won't believe that it's debunked. Half of people will, act as if it's real. I mean, I don't know. There's, from the Biden administration, there's just been some, like, happy talk about AI, and, like, we want to stay innovative and make sure that it's the equal distribution of the power of AI. It's just like, this thing we're dealing with is really, I would say, overall awful and destructive. Like, let's not just let Silicon Valley go play around or something. This is actually extremely serious. Anyway, Hunkle, go for it.
Yo, what's up, Nick? Thanks for joining us today. I know that you're a big McDonald's fan. You're a big fan of the Big Macs. I was wondering, as you've matured and aged and you've tried new burgers, what would you say is your favorite burger right now?
Great question. Favorite burger? I mean, honestly, California has the best burgers. I'm from Chicago. We don't have good burgers here. There's not. They just don't have them. Yeah. Hot dogs, yeah. We have more hot dog stands than we have McDonald's, Wendy's, KFC put together. That's our thing. Yeah. But no good burgers, no good donuts.
Just say it, Nick. Just say it.
Swiss, melted Swiss, roasted mushrooms, caramelized onions.
Yeah. Where can you find it?
At a number of places. Now, you can get that anywhere. That was good. but we love that. I mean, you did the
Yeah.
impression of me earlier. So I guess we're even now.
It's good stuff.
That's good, yeah. That's hot stuff.
Hot stuff.
That's
Yeah.
hot stuff. Yeah.
There we go. All right, N, you're up.
Hi, so maybe shifting the topic of conversation to something a little bit heavier, if that's all right. So if we could spend a little time talking about religion, so I wouldn't ask either of you to debate your personal faith, but rather the utility of Christianity in accomplishing your political goals. I think it's fair to say that you have, that maybe this is the biggest point of distinction between both of you, with Richard viewing Christianity as an obstacle to accomplishing those goals, Nick obviously viewing them instead as necessary and even essential. So perhaps if both of you could comment on that and maybe try to reconcile it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, so I watch, it's interesting, actually. I talk with Destiny, and I saw you talk with Destiny on Adam 22. And what's interesting is I talked to Destiny, I sort of realized that the fundamental difference between us is that he's not religious. So not even really that he's a leftist, it's that he's sort of a materialist. And what's interesting, as a result of some of those conversations, he said that on the left, they need to develop. Now, I don't think he's actually that smart. I mean, I've kind of been on this crusade to prove that he's pretty dumb, actually, and doesn't know anything. But he goes to his fans.
If I could just jump in real quick, he's an internet. I met him perfectly nice. Like I don't have any personal animosity or anything. He's like an internet person where there's no background or knowledge. It's just kind of like I want to just win. Like it's like it's like basketball. Like I want to just score a layup, like get a point. And, debate's not really debate at its best isn't about that. It's actually about like coming to a deeper conclusion, like common ground and kind of honing yourself by slamming up against, ideas, kind of confronting one another. And I think he's like a product of his medium, which is Twitch, and just like these kids kind of getting in arguments, almost like debate club or something. So I say that as a constructive criticism. I hope he actually reads a book and learns which language the Bible was written in.
No, yeah, and I absolutely agree. I think he's totally unimpressive in that regard, and it's blown me away the things he just doesn't know. And it's like you say, there are things anyone would know if there was any real curiosity or any real engagement with what's happening. I mean, like people, his fans say, well, you're getting on him because he doesn't know where Virginia is on a map. It's like, okay, but it's not. It's that if he even cared, if it was actually about that for him, it would be impossible not to know these things if you're actually interested. But anyway, so with him, he tells his followers, well, what we need with liberalism is an overarching idea, something bigger than ourselves that provides meaning and all these things. And I feel like the Nietzscheans have sort of that same thing. They talk about like Bronze Age pervert and you. I mean, you're very different, but you're also both trying to come up with what's that, Apollonianism, I think is what you guys are about. Yeah. He's about something else. But with me, I feel like now I do believe in God. And I think that the trick that the Nietzscheans and the liberals are trying to overcome is a sort of self-conscious generation of belief, which makes it not true belief. It's like in Inception when they say it's impossible to fake true inspiration. It's impossible to sort of fabricate that feeling. If we say that we're doing a religion because of its effects, because of its products, you'll never get those products because then it's not religion, because then it's a sort of self-conscious imitation of religion or self-conscious imitation of belief. It's not true belief. And I think that it's impossible to replicate with anything else because it's not real. Apollo is not a real, I don't know. I don't think you believe that. He's not a real person. He's not a real supernatural entity. He's not extrinsic to mankind or the universe. And therefore we can't give our lives to that. We can't, and it really becomes, it's almost the same thing like with political sovereignty. Schmidt says what distinguishes a sovereign is he can take life. He can order people to go kill and be killed Similarly, I feel like the effect of religion only works if you're willing to die or kill for it, because it's transcendent. It's actually really transcendent. And I don't think that's the case with any kind of overman archetype or something like that. It becomes a LARP.
So what you definitely believe that Jesus walked the earth?
Yeah, I believe
he was a real person, but also incarnated God.
Yes.
Okay. So, but in what other way is religion real? Like, is it real because there are, and something I would of course not dispute, which is that there are millions of people sincerely believe it and are motivated. Is that kind of part of the reality, a Holy Spirit, if you will? Okay.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit binding everyone together.
Right. Okay, Mark, do you want to? I don't want to get too testy about this issue, but
yeah, I don't either. I'm kind of enjoying our rapport with Nick. So
yeah,
I think that Nick actually, I mean, we do appreciate a lot of the stuff you do, in what we would probably call the secular realm of politics, and maybe you don't make that distinction, but that's fine. But we think that some of your political activism is useful. And we think that you're a smart guy, you're funny. And
but feel free. I'm not going to take it personal. You don't need to.
Oh no,
need the preamble. Just
okay.
You can just
yeah.
give it to me straight.
But I hate your guts.
All right. Well, no. Yeah, but I don't. I mean, some people, there is a kind of emotionalism, of course, with religion. So
yeah,
the things that you're not supposed to talk about are religion and politics. Of course, we're talking about politics, but we thought that we want to be friendly to our guests, of course. But yeah, no, I mean, I would say that really, I think that there's no question that Christianity has the power to bind people and motivate people in a direction. I think that the thing that we question is, what is that direction, right? So we're not convinced that direction is toward a racialist or nationalist goal. We think that it's not toward a racialist or nationalist goal. But so and I think that I also believe in God too, by the way. You might class my belief in God as more deist, I think, is probably might be a fair way of describing it. Nick, or rather Richard, now I can't make a distinction between you two. You've become so friendly. But Richard, I think, is an atheist, or he might class himself as an atheist or agnostic. I don't know. But I think that in Apollonians, I think, are allowed to be atheist in the way that Jews are allowed to be atheist. For example, you can be an atheist Jew and so forth. And I think that, I think that the way that we look at it is that we're trying to achieve a kind of maximum sobriety, as it were. So in a way, it is kind of the opposite of the Christian goal. Whereas you could say, well, Christianity becomes a way of making people passionate, motivated, and directed toward a transcendent goal. I would argue that so I guess in a way there is this kind of deist aspect or influence to it, is that we're looking more for sobriety and reason and a kind of planning toward goals that are earthly, but are also involve an afterlife, in the sense that we a kind of verifiable afterlife, in the sense that we understand children, for example, to be a kind of verifiable afterlife and so forth. I don't, the idea of an afterworld, I don't necessarily exclude that possibility. But I think that we do, and Richard probably more adamantly excludes that possibility, but I think that we do see it as a way of kind of manipulating people to bad ends, or ends that are not, for example, conducive to racial survival and so forth. That's just our perspective or our opinion. But
let me ask this, Nick. In the sense of belief, like, and I understand Christian sincerity. I absolutely understand it, and I do go to church. I guess I'm very conflicted in this sense. But when you see a work of art that expresses an ideal of a human form or human action, or even on a more down to earth way, when you're just passionately in love with a woman and just want to take it in, don't you in those senses kind of believe in God, in the sense that you're in that intense experience, you're experiencing Venus? And in that, in looking at maybe even a work of art, or maybe even a great athlete accomplishing something, or you just see human intelligence in a perfect form, you're experiencing the Apollonian in that sense, and in that sense you believe. So I don't think I get the kind of criticism of we're making it up, and we're trying to revive something, and what we believe in is real. But I guess I would say that we're going for a different kind of faith, in the sense that we want ideals for human behavior to exist. And when you're idolizing those ideals, you are in a way believing in them and experiencing them. If you're in love, you know who Venus is. And if you read Shakespeare, or just, touched by it, you know who Apollo is, who's Apollo, god of music and other things, but also intelligence. You just know it. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to create a form that we want to strive after. And I actually, to be fair, I think Jesus also does this in a way. It's about being like Jesus and experiencing him. And in that sense, you have faith, not necessarily in the sense in the way that word is used in Christian context.
I've never heard it explained that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. But to the caller's question, I would say that I don't think it's necessary that we reconcile these things. I think that I'm not trying to convert Nick or anything like that. I don't think Richard's trying to convert Nick. And I don't think that if someone's instinct is to become a Christian, I think that they should pursue that instinct, honestly, and I think I'm 100% fine with that. If someone is kind of like natively or instinctively a Christian, I think that they should pursue that.
Yeah, I would
what
say.
About Nick? Nick, do you want to convert them?
Yeah, I mean, by definition, I want everyone to be. I'm
Okay,
not going to try and
this is the problem.
And we take that as a compliment, because we think we think that comes from a good place from Nick. We don't doubt that.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point though, Mark, I actually agree with you, and I think there are some as far as Christianity, and it's not, if you're looking for a religion or a belief system that's designed to advance racialism, it really isn't. That wouldn't be the ideal one, right? That wouldn't necessarily comport with that, or even any understanding of genetics, because when you think about eugenics, this is a tough one for me, because on the one hand, you see that clearly genetics matter far more than anyone would like to admit. And there are good genetic practices and bad genetic practices, and they lead to good outcomes versus bad outcomes. And Christianity says, especially now, it is, I don't want to say it's a problem, but more people are living than ever before, very high mutational load, and you're getting sort of bad genetic effects. And, as a Christian, it's like, well, you struggle for the answer, because a secular person would say, oh, well, the answer is abortion or sterilization or whatever. And we would say, well, that's immoral. And so, I haven't thought too deeply about that, but it does present sort of a quandary. So I get, where a racialist would come from on that. And I guess with regard to what you're saying, I get what you're saying. For me, this is just my experience growing up, because I agree with you about experiencing excellence or the ideal forms. And I'm, not like a trained philosopher. I'm sure there's Platonic ideas there, but also in Christianity. But I'll just say this.
We like that about you, Nick, actually. We like your earthiness.
That you don't try to do philosophy,
and we
actually.
Like that you're not pretentious, and you don't think you're like Plato or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I feel like when I come in, because I know Richard's educated, so I come in and I'm like, hey, I'm just some guy, but at least from my experience, I just feel like without God, it doesn't matter. Maybe this is a personality thing, but for me, without God, I wouldn't care about anything. I would feel like nothing would matter. Nothing would govern my behavior. And honestly, I wouldn't care about excellence. Maybe that's, now don't get me wrong. I would still have, either inherent or what's the word, sort of ingrained behaviors or things like that. But I don't know that I would actually really fundamentally care. And so to me, that's not an argument. I'm just saying, for me, the obstacle for anything that is non-theistic or even anything that's Gnostic is if you don't believe in the reality of religion, the reality of an afterlife and a moral truth and a judgment, I just wouldn't even care. And that, so anyway, that's just where I come from, but I never heard it said that way. And that's sort of interesting, I guess,
Nick,
because I always thought it's sort of like self-help, but what you're saying makes more sense.
I'm sympathetic to your perspective. And I think that that's one of the reasons that I believe in God. Like, I believe that there's a purpose to my life. And I think that that's one of the things that you're getting at. As far as the afterlife is concerned, you know, it's a very profound and weird or difficult question. I mean, it's not, I mean, we can't even really kind of conceive of an afterlife. What is an afterlife? Is it all pleasure? If you live in a period that's all, if you live in a realm that's all pleasure, what is pleasure? Pleasure, there's a kind of unity of opposites. You know, if there's no pain, pleasure, if there's no suffering, and so forth. So it's almost something that's beyond human comprehension. And, you know, I think that my philosophy is that you should just try to leave the world a better place than you found it. And including, though, especially for your offspring and those related to you. And so it's a philosophy of sort of ameliorating the world, I would say, because again, your offspring are a kind of verifiable afterworld. You can say, okay, well, that is a real, you know, not to be a materialist, of flesh and blood afterworld. And so that you can, in that you have to kind of trust that is real, that you don't live in a kind of illusion that God isn't like deceiving you by putting you in this weird, like sort of flesh material maze, but that it actually is relevant, that you're here to do good in the world and that you do have a purpose. Because the chance of you existing at all is extreme. I mean, these are some of the reasons why I believe in God, is that the chances of us existing at all are tiny, are ridiculously remote, you know? The fact that your sperm hit the egg and so forth, right? Or that your sperm was released to hit the egg at that time. Like the probability is just kind of astronomically low that you exist at all. And the fact that we're communicating now, that we're speaking to each other now, that's also like, I mean, if theoretically we live for a short period and then we die for all of eternity and there's nothing, it's a kind of void, what are the chances that now is now and that we're alive and that we're speaking? You know what I mean? It's just like things like that. I mean, I think the idea of the eternal reoccurrence is Nietzsche, it's a kind of view that it's an ancient view that some philosophers held or believed in, this idea that we live our lives in a kind of an eternal reoccurrence. It's sort of like it's like that movie Groundhog Day, right?
Groundhog, yeah.
And I mean, it almost seems like it's something that could even be sort of scientifically verifiable. Like, for example, if the soul is ultimately the consequence of particular atoms coming together in a body and so forth, if you take even if you take a materialistic view of the universe. So, I mean, it's related as well to the idea that if a chimpanzee is typing Shakespeare, there's
an infinite amount of time.
Yeah.
And there's a finite amount of things.
Eventually, the chimpanzee will type Shakespeare. If you assume that the universe is infinite, then it kind of makes sense that there would be an eternal reoccurrence, that this life would happen again. How could it not? If you're assuming, in a sort of infinitude, how could it not occur again? Right? Even if you're looking at the world in a completely materialistic way, in considering the laws of physics and so forth.
But Christianity doesn't assume an infinity. Christianity, there's a beginning and an end. So I think that's, I mean, I do think that those are the, two major branches of what Nietzsche was getting at in an eternal universe. There's no ending and no beginning. It's always going and reproducing and being born again, if you will. Versus a Christian view of a real some sort of development. There's a beginning and an end times that you can locate.
I mean, one thing that I think that we'll say that I'm sure Richard will agree with me on this, that both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament are absolute works of genius. I mean, it's just incredible what's contained in those books. And as works of religion and works of art, I mean, they might stand as the most genius works of man. I mean, I think it's, or at least in terms of the production of culture and so forth, right? I mean, there were other realms of genius, of course. You know, people invented rockets to fly to the moon. They invented the nuclear bomb, unfortunately, and things like this. But you know, so I think that the strange thing is that we actually have I feel like that we have a kind of respect for biblical works that Christians and people way lack. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? You know, I'm not. That's not a criticism, certainly of present company. You know, you know, and I have no reason to doubt your devotion or piety or anything like this. But I think you understand our perspective. We're in a strange way very respectful of Christianity and even Judaism. Though we see Judaism, of course, as a kind of mothership that has to be deconstructed and destroyed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're just being honest, you know what I mean? But in any case, in any case, Nick, I'm glad that we can have a friendly conversation about these matters. And
likewise. I mean, it's I think it's par for the course, just like politics. I mean, it's not, to me, it's not personal. I know atheists exist. You know, that doesn't, I mean, it bothers me, but not like, hey, get out of my face. You know, I mean, we can talk about the differences. So for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's like those
I don't consider myself
dialogues.
an atheist. Yeah. I don't consider myself.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. It's like those interfaith dialogues when I was in high school, where there'd be like the rabbi and the Catholic and the Protestant. So, yeah. We'll have a new version of that where we'll all agree on all sorts of things. Yeah. I think you dropped out. Okay, let me go to. We'll power through these next four here. So Sam Schwellenbach.
Hey guys, welcome Nick. Big fan of yours.
Hi.
Question somewhat related to the gym conversation. Managerial class doesn't seem especially professional. Arguments. What do you think about effective ways to motivate them or convince them or bully them?
Motivate who?
Our sort of managerial class, you know, the people in the universities, corporate leadership. You know, you see these
to do what?
Well, to do, you know, what you want them to do. I mean, your perspective, I mean, everyone's perspective is to have a more sort of common sense attitude, a more kind of reasonable attitude towards all these different issues. You know, we've had millions of immigrants, and, you know, I mean, obviously a more kind of reasonable attitude towards that is work visas.
All right, I'll jump in here. I don't think we can motivate the managerial class because they're not going to really answer to us. And the managerial class, they answer to money to some extent, but they answer to power, and we don't got it. We've got some influence, and we have a little bit of power, but I don't think we're going to go and convince like a bureaucrat that we're right and he's going to work on our behalf, or like someone in middle management at Amazon is going to, I don't know how to crack that nut, but I don't think the only people who they answer to are the people who can fire them directly or who are paying their paycheck. I mean, that is who they are. They are instruments. And so I think we need to try to influence other people. But people who butter their bread by working for the regime, I mean, why would they want to risk that? They're not the type to do that. I guess that's my kind of cynical and depressing answer to that question.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's just the age-old question of, are we trying to red pill the masses or whatever? And I think the power doesn't come from them. And it's sort of like begging the question. It's like, how would you influence the middle managers or the lower people? Well, you would need power to do that. So that necessarily entails going above their pay grade. So, and at that point, you've solved it. How do you get the people on the bottom? Well, you need the institutions at the top. So,
well, there was something about there. I think there was a story that I read in one of these books on the World War II, but it was Joseph Goebbels. When he was an activist in the party, he was always getting his balls broken by this Berlin chief of police, just over and over. This guy, he would create new laws, like they'd outlaw brown shirts. I forgot all these details. They'd break up rallies, throw them in prison for the night, et cetera, et cetera. And he just hated this guy, this chief of police. And after the taking of power in 1933, the chief of police came to visit Goebbels in his office. And he had almost made this man into like a monster in his mind, He was kind of waiting back, and the guy came in and clicked his heels, and he was like, all right, let's go. And again, like, who should I oppress on your behalf, sir? And that's that. I don't want to dehumanize these people, but that's kind of how they are. All of these people who you hate, they would have been good Nazis. They would have been good communists. They would have been good Finnish nationalists. It's just about, they're smart. They recognize how the system works, what you have to say. They know the language and how they're very attuned to their environment, and they know how to work the ways up. So, yeah, I mean, it is that kind of like, I guess, cart and horse problem, or, of like, once you have power, they're already on your side. But, how do you get power? That's the issue. All right, I'll try.
More useful than social media anons, is what you're trying to say, I think.
Well, yeah, social media anons will never. Right, they'll never click their heels. All right, we'll do these. I'll try to be concise because we've been going for a while here. Okay, big tech, you're up.
Hey, let's go. I know we're in the lightning round.
Oh, great.
Lightning round.
Quick question, 2 parts. First part, Nick and then Richard. Hey, big fans of both of you guys. Gun in your mouth. Which one would you choose to lead the world right now? Pope Francis or Hitler? Who would be better? Part 2, you got to choose which toon porn you're going to watch. Is it Family Guy or The Simpsons? Thanks for letting me call in.
You don't have to answer that.
You can
Pope Francis, of course.
Okay. I agree. Yes. I don't want to talk about toon porn.
I disagree, but that's as much as I'll say.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Spency.
Discussion tonight. Thank you for having this one. Big fan of Nick. It's nice to hear you both speak together. If you can, really quickly, I know you've been here a while. Would you two go head to head on Russia, Ukraine, and NATO and the European Union for a little bit?
Oh, it's the night's late.
Yeah, okay.
I will be as concise as possible, though. Everyone needs a good enemy. Russia can act as that enemy. NATO is an armed forces that it might include Turkey as well, but is basically a European army. The Europeans don't have their own army. This is what it is. It also connects America with the home continent. If I could devise a Apollonian armed forces, I would recreate NATO. So why would I oppose it? I understand that NATO is gay or globo homo or whatever you want to say, but the world is gay and globo homo. I mean, that's not NATO's a problem. I think that it's a real tragedy that we're forgetting about Ukraine. And I think the Ukraine question brought up real questions about like, who are we? Who are we as the West? And I think those are good. So if I were to be as concise as possible, that's how I would do it.
That's an interesting take. I'm merely in favor of Russia because I like to see the U.S. regime humiliated. And I think that the more that American influence in the world diminishes, the better it is for dissidents in America. Because I'm just very threatened by liberal hegemony.
Can you expand on that and play that out? Because I've heard you say that before,
what?
but you kind of just stopped there about why that is. Why is that the case? That if American power diminishes, it's good for dissidents in the country.
I've never stopped at that point. I've always said that I'm a perfect example of this. In the United States, I can't have a bank account. I can't have payment processing. I can't have access to social media. Theoretically, if there is some world order where we can access a Chinese service for those types of things, or even if it becomes inhospitable for a person like me to live in the United States, anywhere that's under the security umbrella of China or Russia, I would be safe. Edward Snowden, when he betrayed the NSA, where did he go? He couldn't go to anywhere in the world other than Russia.
Yeah, but they're friendly to him
because only Russia could protect him.
Yeah, but are they not friendly to him out of spite of America? Not necessarily because they believe in his cause. Like, do you really think China and Russia?
What difference does it make?
No, it makes a huge
difference. Does it make?
Well, I mean, they would just use you as a pawn, and that's that you're assuming they would even use you at all. I mean,
it's arbitrage. It's dissent arbitrage. The United States welcomes Russia and China's dissidents. Russia and China welcome America's dissidents. It's the same reason the American colonists got support during the American Revolution from France. And yeah, there was some ideological kinship there as well. But they also did it because they hated the British. And a free America countered the British. And same thing with Germany releasing Lenin into Russia during the Russian Revolution, which secured Brest-Litovsk. But guess who was in Eastern Europe after World War II? So, there's an international component to the domestic political struggle as well. There always has been. So this is not novel. It's not a novel take.
Sure, but that's like a large sacrifice for a small hedge. I mean, in some senses, and you can understand this, it sounds personal. It sounds like you're saying you have an avenue to get out of here if shit hits the fan, rather than actually looking at it as like a global or geopolitical conflict, as far as like you don't actually want China to have like global dominance, do you? I mean,
yes, I do.
No,
yes,
come
I
on.
do.
Like
yes,
objectively, that would not be good for you, even you personally.
Of course, it would be good for me. It would be good for everybody.
No,
it would be good for everybody. Look at.
Yeah, I'm afraid I might have to disagree with you.
Of China. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, they're going to turn you into a Chinese, Nick, and they're going to treat you like they treat the Chinese. Maybe for 5 minutes, they'll be like, "Oh, Nick really pisses off like people we hate. We give him payment processor. Like he caused great harm to evil American Yankee." Like that might happen for 5 minutes, but the idea of living in a Chinese world. I mean, here, I guess I am kind of a dyed-in-the-wool conservative wasp or something. Like the idea of living under Chinese hegemony is something I would not wish on my enemies, actually. Or I would wish on my enemies.
I'm being a little contrarian. I don't really want China to control the world. I will say this, though. Chinese hegemony would look different from American hegemony because China is an inward-facing country. It always has been. So, people do a lot of fear-mongering, and they say they create this idea that like we'll be under a Chinese occupation, and I don't think that's what it would look like necessarily. Regardless, though, the point stands: America will be a superpower throughout this century. It's just that America will not have the kind of uncontested dominance and influence it has in the world. And that does actually mean that it's better for dissidents. It means that, for example, things like TikTok. TikTok saw the rise of a guy like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, and even some of these other things that proliferate on TikTok, could never proliferate on American social media. That's because ByteDance jurisdiction is in China. And so I think, it's just like with the immigrants coming over here. I don't want immigrants to be in America, but it's useful that they're against Israel. Similarly, China and Russia are regaining their sort of historical place in the world. It was an aberration of history that China and Russia have been so relatively weak for the last 30 years. It was necessary and inevitable that they would retake this position. Again, I see this as an opportunity to discredit the current regime. And I also see it as an opportunity. And, you say it's personal, but it's really a distinction without a difference. I am the ultimate dissident in a sense. I mean, or one of the ultimate dissidents. If there's going to be dissent, it's going to come from a guy like me. I mean, if I can't dissent, who can? Because I'm the one that's, one of the most censored and one of the most ostracized or whatever.
Even in recent American history, whenever you have a large opposition force, you can see that the dominant party actually gets more power. I mean, just look 20 years ago, like George Bush, for example. Let's say George Bush was fighting a power that was greater than Afghanistan and Iraq. What do you think would happen? Do you think we'd get more Patriot Acts? Yeah, we'd get it tenfold. Like we'd get 40, 50 more years of Nikki Haley, George Bush type politics. Like if anything, if Americans see Russia and China and all these countries gaining power, do they not get behind the people who are in power to say we want to push back against it? I just don't see the avenue that you're seeing as far as the dissidents go. I mean, you see China not liking, I mean, you don't want to be a Jackson Hinkle for China, do you? I mean, if anything, just out of principle, that's kind of pathetic. I mean,
that's just a non-argument, though.
Jackson Hinkle is like clearly a Russian asset. I mean, like, do you
Well,
disagree
he's
with
a
that?
shill, but saying, you know,
No, I'm not saying it's a
want to
shilling
be
thing.
Jackson Hinkle. I mean, that's not an argument, though.
Okay, fine. Then you can put that aside. Everything I said before that is still relevant. I don't believe that your avenue as a dissident is impacted positively towards you in any way just because, you know, China becomes powerful. The logic doesn't follow. And I think that I think a lot of this, even if you don't understand it, subconsciously comes from spite. Because the state has, you know, kind of put their thumb on you and that's annoyed you. And you have every right to say, like, that's fucked up, and it is. And you gain support from it, but then to go out and say, okay, because of this, I'm now anti-American. I'm pro-American, but anti-American at the same time. It's just convoluted and kind of silly. I mean, you have to see that.
I don't know. I don't think it's convoluted. I don't think it's silly because the regime that is over there in Ukraine and that is over there in Israel and Afghanistan, it's the same. It's literally the same people that are attacking dissidents. It's literally the same people that are funneling the refugees into the country. And when you say it's anti-American, it's not anti-American. America goes into these other countries and spreads poison. It's not a good regime. Now, here's the thing. If the regime was people that I liked, then I would want the regime to be strong and I would want them to dominate China and dominate Russia and all these other people. But it's the wrong regime. And so I'm in favor of a total regime change and displacing these people. And if that means that there's sort of like this collapse in their credibility and authority, I support that. Like, for example, when we get pushed out of Afghanistan and we lose the war in Ukraine, this is all the current regime losing credibility. It's the current regime that's losing respect. It's the current regime that's losing resources and failing. I support all of that. And I think that all of that hastens the end of the current regime. I mean, what you're arguing is that we should empower the regime, that the regime should have influence in more places and it should be wealthier and it should be the reigning champion of the world. I don't see how that benefits people that seek the end of the regime.
I won't go on much further, but
yeah, let me submit something. I think there is a actually kind of fascinating contradiction, though, Nick, because I think your instincts are to be pro-American, you know, good old-fashioned, old-time religion, you know, that kind of stuff, and those are healthy instincts. But then as you've interacted in the world and face these enemies and so on, you've got a little bit of that let it burn accelerationism. And those two things actually are, I mean, and I'm not even saying this as like a criticism, because I think we all, containing contradictions is kind of good. There really is a contradiction, because like the American regime falling is also going to be the fall of Trump and MAGA. I mean, the whole thing is going to go down. It's not like there's just liberals there and they lose in Ukraine and then Trump takes over. I mean, Trump is part of the thing that's going to fall. And I also agree that I think we're headed for a crisis. So it's a very, it's contradictory and it's complicated at the same time. There is something interesting about kind of like you're America first, but then an enemy of America at the same time. Because what is America first? What do you mean by that? Like, is it because when John McCain says America first, he means the military, basically. That's what America is in his mind. It's just bases and wars and, you know, stuff like that. When other people say America first, I think they do mean something else. They almost mean the opposite of that. You know, no more military around the world. Let's stay at home. Let's be more introverted and so on. So I think sometimes big ideas get conflated in that way. But I think the position that you're in is unique. It's similar to my position, but we've taken, you know, different paths. But it's like you're anti-American and the ultra-American at the same time, and you'll express those feelings with equal vigor. It's just where you are.
Well, it's because of, you know, what is America then? And when you look at, like, when we say that the United States is supporting Ukraine, what do we mean? We mean that the American state is supporting Ukraine, and the American state are the decision makers inside the state, and they have a certain ideological affinity, and they come from an educational pedigree, and they have all these ties. And I just think it would be silly to sort of, on the one hand, recognize that they are destroying America and they're sort of behind the wheel of America's decline. They're oppressing anybody that tries to reverse this. But then we're also supposed to cheer them on. I mean, to me, that's the contradiction, is to say, like, well, when Milley says that he's tracking white nationalists and learning how they think by reading extremists, we're supposed to be, boo, you know, fuck you, you're a traitor. But then when he says, you know, we're going to show Putin what's up, we're supposed to say, no, but I want him to lead the military and crush Russia. It's like, I want those people to be gone, which means I want them to fail in all their endeavors. And like I said, I think that the rise of China and Russia hastens that. And I think those are perfect examples, is Lenin and Russia, because obviously the Russian Revolution was the defeat of Russia, the total unequivocal surrender of Russia to its enemies. And, you know, but 20 years later, that wasn't the case. And it was a true change in leadership. And, you know, I think that's just sort of a necessary component that happens. I don't know that America can be dominant and uncontested, but also undergo regime change. I don't see how those things happen simultaneously.
That's a fair point. I do think that what's going to come after the American empire is going to be worse. I don't know.
There?
All over the world, I think it's going to be worse. This is where I used to be a Ron Paul person, maybe a little bit like you, where it's like, you know, bring the troops home and like we'll just trade with each other and friendship.
No, I want like I think America should be as big and as powerful as possible.
Okay,
but just not under the trans flag.
I understand, but you kind of, yeah. Okay.
I think you guys agree on that point, more or less. Wouldn't you agree with that, Richard? I mean,
oh, totally. Yeah. 100%. I'm glad you say it that way. I'm glad I'm not talking to one of these goofy paleos who's like, oh, I want my small town to be sovereign.
A republic, not an empire. It's like,
right. Like, fuck you.
Hey,
I want Rockford, Illinois to be a sovereign state. We'll have foreign policy with Pawtucket.
A republic, if you can keep it.
Right.
What?
Hey, Nick, you mentioned Tate. What's your take on Tate? It's a good thing that Tate has become a phenomena in your view. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously like a scumbag because he's a pimp, and that whole business is just disgusting and everything. And he's boorish. I mean, I don't know that I have an affinity for him personally, but and also he is a simp. Like his whole, if you really got into it, I don't know that we're necessarily very close. We're not totally aligned.
Can you be both a pimp and a simp? You can be both
Yes.
a pimp and a simp. All right, excellent.
I think some of the biggest players are actually the biggest simps because they're it's all wrapped up in women's approval and women as a source of validation.
Could be that could you could have a point there.
Right? Because his whole worldview is like, what did he said the other day? Is like, after the whole war is over, I'm gonna hug her, the one, or some shit like that. And it's like, yeah, that is what it's about for you at the end of the day. But no, I mean, I think that he's a figure who is like, he supports Palestine. He criticized the American policy in Ukraine. He's like anti-feminist, and so I think he's like a truly independent figure, and honestly more based than most people give him credit. Like, he's more based than Tucker. Everyone says worships Tucker. You watch Tucker's show, he's really not that based. Like, he says that immigration is a civics problem. It's an issue of voting rights, and et cetera, et cetera. And the men and women thing is one of the biggest issues. Even if he's telling men to be like vulgar materialists, it's better than these men that are like pussies and they're being feminized. So I like him for that reason. Women hate him. That's enough for me, I guess.
Yes, I kind of understand. I was talking to some young people who are undergraduates in college, and I asked them because they knew who I was because I know them. But I said, "Have you ever heard of Nick Fuentes?" And they were like, "No, they didn't." And then I said, so I don't mean that as an insult. And then I said, "Have you ever heard of Andrew Tate?" And they were like, "Oh, like, he's so funny." Like, he clearly, this was like 2 years ago. He clearly got at something in the young male mind that I might even hate him more than, I definitely hate him more than you do, but I will grant him that they are lacking something in the media that they consume, and he just gave it to them just full bore, raw energy. But yeah, I can't look past some things.
Through some of these.
Let's do So John, we'll do John, and then we'll call it a night because the other people have already asked a question. So John, you have the last question. You have to unmute yourself.
Hello. My last question is for Spencer and Fuentes concerning Henry Kissinger, who died today. And I was wondering whether each of you think he has had a positive or a negative influence on foreign policy. And also I wanted to hear your thoughts on, Spengler, and specifically his decline of the West theory, and his kind of whole pessimistic history. And to what degree any of you kind of know that figure?
You can go first.
Because wait, one more thing. Because Henry Kissinger actually recommended that Richard Nixon actually read The Decline of the West by Spengler.
I didn't know that. Well, I think that I'm going to be honest. I don't know a ton about Kissinger, but I think that the Nixon foreign policy was good, and I thought it was successful. So insofar as I know Kissinger was his Secretary of State or whatever, I'm in support of that. And as far as Death of the West goes, I read that years ago. I read the abridged version, and honestly, it was a little over my head. I mean, I feel like because I don't have the liberal arts education you have, so when it starts to get into like technical stuff about art and architecture, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what a flying buttress is at that time and all this. And the calculus I know a little bit better because I knew math. So when because it's his whole study of civilizations, and I don't know every aspect of that. I guess I'm not well-rounded in that way. But well, I thought the end was very interesting when he talks about the new Caesarism, and he talks about the role of finance in democracy. And I do tend to agree with him about the cyclical nature of, there's many different theories about the cyclical nature of civilizations. You talked about the 80-year thing with Israel, and people talk about the fourth turning and stuff like that. I think there is a lot of truth to these generational patterns, and I think he's probably right. And he says about the dread of living in the autumn of your civilization. You're born during the dying of the civilization. And I agree. I think that when you look around, it's a lot of problems without any easy answers, or any answer at all, actually, because it's on a much more fundamental level than people even understand. And I think maybe that's what Spengler was getting at. It's not like, the economy is bad. It's like you look at the faces of the people in the newer generations, and I think Darren Beatty said this. It's who I have sort of mixed feelings on him lately, but he said, we don't even have a civilization that could produce a genius anymore. It just doesn't exist. We don't have the kind of ecosystem or the kind of culture that would produce a great school, that would produce a tradition, that could hone and select and produce a genius. And I don't know how you get that back. I think once it's gone, it's kind of gone. I think we possess the potential for a rebirth, but I think maybe that's far off, and we have to go through a miserable death to get there. In other words, not in our lifetime. So that's my feelings on Spengler.
I'll be very brief because it's late. Yeah, Kissinger, good. Overall, good. I like his mentality. Even if I disagree with him, I just like the mentality that he brought to the job, and there aren't many like him. Yeah, I mean, I'll channel some Mark Brauman here. I think the real challenge is to overcome those cycles of degeneration. We don't need to go through this Dionysian phase where sex is out of control and we have sex without producing babies even. I mean, it's just terrible. We don't need to go through that in order to be reborn. Strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times create strong men. We need to develop institutions and religious institutions where we don't need to go through these cycles. Like there's nothing inherently good about those cycles. It might be descriptive in some way, but I think the real challenge is to overcome that we can build things that last millennia in these institutions, and that we can keep moving forward without the fall of Rome every 400 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I of course agree. I'll just echo what you were saying. And the Romans had a metaphor for this as well. There's this proto-Jewish god Saturn, and there's a metaphor where Jupiter overthrows Saturn. Saturn represents time as well, Chronos, and this is how Jupiter becomes immortal. And the idea there in the Roman Empire was that part of Jupiter's task was to put Chronos or Saturn or time or the seasons, to enslave them, to control them, to dominate them. And this would be a way for a kind of immortality of the empire, of the nation, and of the Roman race. The Romans were interested in this question. It's ultimately not a modern question. Of course, the ancients were aware of civilizational decline and so forth. We see in Daniel, the book of Daniel, for example, Nebuchadnezzar, he gives the dream to Nebuchadnezzar. He's kind of giving him a curse, right? He's interpreting this dream, but he's also in that parable as well. Nebuchadnezzar's like, well, you have to tell me what my dream is, right? And so Nebuchadnezzar doesn't even tell the sort of mages that he assembles, including Daniel, what his dream is. So, a possible reading of that parable is, Daniel's kind of inventing the dream, essentially, or he's telling, right? But even if he's not inventing the dream, he's interpreting the dream, right? And he's he's demoralizing him effectively. He's saying, the thing is going to decline, right? So as Kissinger goes to Nixon and gives him, decline of the West, he says, hey, here's a little fucking black pill, bitch. You're going down, right? But do we need to go down? Do we need to go down? I don't know. I say we can take a lot of these prodigal energies and turn them into ascendant movements, all these instincts for decline. Why does it have to be degenerate? And the reason it has to be degenerate is because, frankly, we're controlled by a Jewish elite. I mean, let's be frank here. You know what I mean? But they're waning in power. So I think that institutions could develop where all this sort of decadent prodigal energy that goes into degeneration essentially can be rechanneled in a kind of ascendant direction. That's my feeling on it. And it seems like a kind of obvious answer. And if we're invested in this struggle for civilization, let's get real. Let's figure out the problem. This idea of cycles, it's ultimately a metaphor. It's related to like harvest metaphors, and and it's ultimately given to us through religions of this sort of harvest, this cycle. And well, we're not crops, we're not livestock animals. We should control our destiny. We should get a handle on civilization and figure out a way to give it greater permanence. And I think part of that answer too is developing a sort of an aristocratic class that is invested in this project and sees it as an eternal project. They want their why, sure, we have to have children, but it shouldn't be like the turtle giving birth to a bunch of turtles and hoping they don't get picked off or killed by seagulls. We're humans. We should solve this problem, and we should give our lineage a greater chance of survival and success. We should create the environment, the milieu that makes it possible. We're intelligent. We put people on the moon. We can fucking figure this shit out. You know what I mean? But it's establishing it's establishing a culture essentially, and it requires, as Nick was saying, it requires that genius. And well, if we're, great problems make great men is basically what it boils down to. And we have great problems. I think, look, I think Nick is sort of, maybe it's false modesty or something, but I think he's selling himself a little short. I mean, we can do great things, and including Nick. So I think that we, Spangler also says that optimism is cowardice. I mean, what kind of bullshit is this, right? Talk about, talk about the black pill. I mean, it's optimism is bravery. I mean, realism is bravery, but optimism is finding solutions and solving a problem. That's bravery. That's courage. So I don't know. I mean, Spangler, he's overrated in my view. I think he's worth reading because he does have some insights, but I think he's overrated ultimately.
All right, Nick, thank you. I'm glad. Let's do it again. I really enjoyed this, and but we wish you the best, and we're really happy that you came on here. And we'll need to check in because I think things are gonna get wild in the next year. So, but Godspeed, and keep doing your work.
Good luck.
Thanks for having me. I thought it was a great call. So yeah,
awesome.
I'd love to do it again, and likewise, good luck with everything.
Thank you. We will. All right, guys. That was really special. So let's just end it here, and I'll talk to you guys soon. I think we're gonna not have a call on Thursday. Just this was a big blowout, but I'll talk to you guys soon. All right, bye.